meeting is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is maintenance of international peace and security, promoting international peace and security through multilateralism, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. The agenda is adopted. I would like to warmly welcome the Secretary General, the distinguished ministers, and other high-level representatives present in the Security Council chamber. Your presence today underscores the importance of the subject matter under discussion. Before each of you is a list of speakers who have requested to participate in accordance with Rules 37 and 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure. We propose that they be invited to participate in this meeting. There being no objection, it is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of the Council members to document S/2025/443, a letter dated 1st of July 2025 from the Permanent Representative of Pakistan to the United Nations, addressed to the Secretary General, transmitting a concert paper on the item under consideration. Members of the Council have before them document S/2025/480, the text of a draft resolution submitted by Pakistan. The Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the draft resolution before it. I shall put the draft resolution to the vote now. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in the document S/2025/480 please raise their hands? The result of the voting, I think, is all consensus. The draft resolution has been adopted unanimously as Resolution 2788 of 2025. I now give the floor to Honorable Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I want to thank Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar and Pakistan for convening today's open debate. The topic of today's debate shines a light on the clear connection between international peace and multilateralism. 8 years ago, the United Nations was founded with a primary purpose: to safeguard humanity from the scourge of war. The architects of the United Nations Charter recognize that the peaceful resolution of disputes is the lifeline when geopolitical tensions escalate, when unresolved disputes fuel the flames of conflict, and when states lose trust in each other. The Charter lays out a number of important tools to forge peace. Article 2.3 of the UN Charter is clear. All members shall settle their international disputes by peaceful means, in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered. Chapter 6 of the Charter is equally clear on the specific responsibilities of this Council to help ensure the pacific settlement of disputes by negotiation, inquiry, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, judicial settlement, resort to regional agencies or arrangements, or other peaceful means of their own choice. Action 16 of the Pact of the Future calls on Member States to recommit to all the mechanisms of preventive diplomacy and the peaceful settlement of disputes. I commend Pakistan for utilizing its presidency to put forward the resolution urging all Member States to make full use of these tools in our collective pursuit of global peace. This is needed now more than ever. Around the world, we see an utter disregard for, if not outright violation of, international law, including international human rights law, international refugee law, international humanitarian law, and the UN Charter itself, without any accountability. These failures to uphold international obligations are coming at a time of a widening geopolitical divides and conflicts. And the cost is staggering, measured in human lives, shattered communities, and lost futures. We need look no further than the horror show in Gaza, with a level of death and destruction without parallel in recent times. Malnourishment is soaring, starvation is knocking on every door. And now we are seeing the last gasp of a humanitarian system built on humanitarian principles. This system is being denied the conditions to function, denied the space to deliver, denied the safety to save lives. With Israeli military operations intensifying and new displacement orders issued in Deir al-Balah, devastation is being layered upon devastation. I am appalled that UN premises have been struck, among them facilities of the UN Office for Project Services and the World Health Organization, including WHO's main warehouse. This is despite all parties having been informed of the locations of these UN facilities. These premises are inviolable and must be protected under international humanitarian law without exception. From Gaza to Ukraine, from Sahel to Sudan, Haiti and Myanmar, and many other parts of the world, conflict is raging, international law is being trampled, and anger and displacement are at record levels. And terrorism, violent extremism, and transnational crime remain persistent scourges, pushing security further out of reach. Diplomacy may not have always succeeded in preventing conflicts, violence, and instability, but it still holds the power to stop them. Mr. President, peace is a choice, and the world expects the UN Security Council to help countries make this choice. This Council is at the center of the global architecture for peace and security. Its creation reflected a central truth. Competition between states is a geopolitical reality, but cooperation, anchored in shared interests and the greater good, is the sustainable pathway to peace. Too often, we see divisions, entrenched positions, and escalatory discourse blocking solutions and the effectiveness of the Council. But we have also seen some inspiring examples of finding common ground and forging solutions to global problems. For example, today marks 3 years since the signing of the Black Sea Initiative and the Memorandum of Understanding with the Russian Federation, efforts that show that we can achieve through mediation and the good offices of the United Nations, even during the most challenging moments. And we've seen many other recent examples. From the Seville Conference on Financing for Development, to the Oceans Conference in Nice, to the agreement on marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction and the Cybercrime Treaty, to the Pact for the Future adopted last year. The Pact in particular demonstrates a clear recommitment by the world to strengthen the United Nations collective security system. Drawing from the new Agenda for Peace, it prioritizes preventive diplomacy and mediation, all areas where this Council can play a vital role. As we look to the theme of today's debate, I see 3 areas where we can live up to the Pact's call to renew our commitment to, and the world's face in, the multilateral problem-solving architecture. First, this Council's members, in particular its permanent members, must continue working to overcome divisions. The majority of situations on the Security Council agenda are complex and resist quick fixes. But even in the darkest days of the Cold War, the collective dialogue and decision-making in this Council underpin the common and effective system of global security. one that successfully developed a range of peacekeeping missions, one that opened the door for vital humanitarian aid to flow to people in need, and one that helped prevent a third world war. I urge you to summon this same spirit by keeping channels open, continue to listen in good faith and working to overcome differences and building consensus. We must also work to ensure that this Council reflects the world of today, not the world of 80 years ago. This Council should be made more representative of today's geopolitical realities. And we must continue improving the working methods of this Council to make it more inclusive, transparent, efficient and accountable. I urge you to continue building consensus to move the intergovernmental negotiations forward. Second, this Council must continue strengthening cooperation with regional and sub-regional partners. The landmark adoption of Security Council Resolution 2719, supporting African Union-led peace support operations through assessed contributions, is a good example of how we can join efforts with regional organizations to support more effective responses. I also commend this Council's steps to strengthen and rebuild regional security frameworks to encourage dialogue and advance the peaceful settlement of disputes. Troisièmement, les États membres doivent honorer leurs obligations en vertu du droit international, y compris la Charte des Nations Unies, le droit international des droits humains et le droit international humanitaire. Le pacte pour l'avenir appelle tous les États membres à respecter leurs engagements envers la Charte, ainsi que les principes de respect de la souveraineté, de l'intégrité territoriale et de l'indépendance politique des États. Tous ces principes sont ancrés dans le droit international et reposent sur l'engagement de donner la priorité à la prévention des conflits et au règlement pacifique des différends par le dialogue et la diplomatie. Le pacte reconnaît également la contribution essentielle de la Cour internationale de justice qui fêtera son 80e anniversaire l'année prochaine. Monsieur le Président, à l'occasion du 80e anniversaire de notre organisation et de la Charte qui lui donne vie et forme, nous devons renouveler notre engagement envers l'esprit multilatéral de la paix par la diplomatie. Je me réjouis de travailler avec vous en ce sens afin de parvenir à la paix et à la sécurité internationale que les peuples du monde entier espèrent et méritent. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Mr. Secretary General, fellow ministers, excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is a great honor and pleasure to preside over today's high-level open debate of the UN Security Council on the important theme of promoting international peace and security through multilateralism and peaceful settlement of disputes. Pakistan is striving to fulfill the solemn responsibility of Security Council's presidency with a deep sense of purpose, humility, and conviction. Our approach will continue to remain anchored in the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, respect for international law, and a steadfast commitment to multilateralism. I thank Secretary General for his thoughtful and insightful remarks. We deeply appreciate Secretary General's leadership and the commitment in upholding the noble ideals enshrined in the UN Charter. I also wish to acknowledge the high level of interest among the UN membership in today's open debate, including ministerial participation. We look forward to hearing their important contributions. I am extremely pleased with the adoption of the Resolution 2788 on strengthening mechanism for peaceful settlement of disputes by the Council today. It is indeed a welcome expression of our collective will and the determination to pursuing dialogue and diplomacy for the pacific settlement of disputes in full conformity with the Charter and the expectations of the international community. I thank all Council members for their positive and constructive engagement with Pakistan's delegation in achieving this important consensus. Excellencies, today's debate is both timely and urgent. Multilateralism is not merely a diplomatic convenience, it is the need of the hour. Peaceful settlement of dispute is not just a principle, it is the lifeline of global stability. The international community today faces a deeply troubling landscape of unresolved conflicts, festering disputes, and new and escalating crises. Geopolitical rivalries, erosion of trust in multilateral institutions, and persistent non-compliance with Security Council resolutions continue to undermine our shared commitment to the maintenance of the international peace and security and respect for international law. Around the world, unresolved disputes have morphed into prolonged conflicts. The flames of war rage in several regions across the globe. These crises have inflicted untold human sufferings, displaced millions, and undermined our collective faith in the international system's ability to deliver justice and peace. Excellencies, we must collectively acknowledge that durable peace is not forged through power projection or unilateralism, but through dialogue, mutual respect, and inclusive diplomacy. The centrality of multilateralism, as reaffirmed in the Pact for the Future, offers a framework for trust building and cooperation essential to conflict prevention and resolution. Pakistan remains a firm believer in the promise and power of multilateralism. As a long-standing member of the United Nations and one of the largest troop contributing countries to the UN peacekeeping, Pakistan's commitment to peace is principled, enduring, and consistent. Excellencies, peaceful settlement of disputes is not just a moral or legal imperative, it is a strategic necessity. Despite the Charter of the United Nations providing comprehensive tools under Chapter 6 for the pacific settlement of disputes, including negotiations, inquiry, mediations, conciliations, arbitration, and judicial settlement, these mechanisms remain underutilized or selectively applied. The Security Council has prime responsibility in this regard, yet we continue to witness the persistence and proliferation of unresolved conflicts, many of which remain on the Council agenda for decades. Selective implementation of Council resolutions, double standards, and the politicization of humanitarian principles have eroded its credibility and effectiveness. The ongoing tragedies in Palestine and the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir are vivid examples of this malice. The prolonged suffering of the Palestinian people, particularly in Gaza, remains a stark reminder of the urgent need for a just and lasting solution. Israel's latest onslaught in Gaza has killed over 58,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children. The humanitarian situation is dire, with civilians bearing the brunt of the violence and deprivations. We reiterate the call for an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire in Gaza and across the occupied territory. The ceasefire must serve as a stepping stone for a broader and durable peace. We earnestly hope that the upcoming conference on the two-state solution will reopen the political horizon and efforts towards a just and the peaceful settlement of the Palestinian question, leading to the realization of the independent and viable state of Palestine based on the pre-1967 borders with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. Excellencies, Pakistan also remains steadfast in its desire for peace in our own region. But this cannot be one-sided effort. It requires reciprocity, sincerity, and willingness to engage in meaningful dialogue, for which Pakistan stands ready. Jammu and Kashmir remains one of the oldest disputes on the agenda of the UN Security Council. It is an internationally recognized disputed territory, the final disposition of which is to be made in accordance with the relevant UN Security Council resolutions and the wishes of the Kashmiri people. No cosmetic measures can serve as a substitute for the fundamental and dialogue and diplomacy working for peacefully arriving at a water-sharing arrangement between two neighbors. The treaty has withstood periods of trials and tribulations in bilateral relations. It is most unfortunate and regrettable that India has chosen to illegally and unilaterally hold this treaty in abeyance on baseless grounds with the intention of withholding the flow of water to 240 million people of Pakistan who rely on it for their livelihood and survival. At the heart of almost all the conflicts across the globe is the crisis of multilateralism, a failure not of principles but of will, a paralysis not of institutions but of political courage. The path to sustainable peace lies in peaceful resolution of disputes. In this spirit, I humbly suggest, first, we must revitalize trust in the UN system. That requires ensuring equal treatment of all conflicts based on international law, not geopolitical expediency. The Security Council resolutions must be implemented universally and without discrimination. Second, we must uphold the primacy of international law, particularly the principles of the UN Charter, in resolving disputes. There must be no space for threat or use of force, foreign occupation, or denial of right to self-determination in today's world. Third, the good offices of the Secretary General should be effectively utilized in the situations of emerging conflict and those involving protracted disputes. Greater support is merited for the mediation support unit. Fourth, peaceful dispute settlement should be a norm, not an exception. Bilateralism cannot be a pretext for inaction when one party refuses to engage. Finally, we may promote regional partnerships in accordance with Chapter 8 of the Charter to support context-specific, inclusive solutions as well as enhance early diplomatic action, including greater investment in the tools of preventive diplomacy. Excellencies, Pakistan's foreign policy remains anchored in the principles of UN Charter, sovereign equality of states, non-interference, a right to self-determination, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. We have always preferred diplomacy over confrontation, engagement over isolation, and partnership over polarization. We covet a world that is not divided by conflict, but united by cooperation and peaceful coexistence. Excellencies, let this debate serve as a collective reaffirmation of our faith in multilateralism, a recommitment to the peaceful settlement of disputes, and a solemn promise to those who look to this Council not for words, but for action. It is time to return to the spirit of San Francisco, where the Charter was born out of the ashes of war and with a hope for peace. At the 80th anniversary of the foundation of the organization, we owe it to the peoples of the world to make the UN even more relevant as a platform for dialogue, but also as an institution that delivers justice, upholds international law, and promotes sustainable peace. I thank you all. I now resume my functions as President of the Council. I now give the floor to His Excellency Lord Ray Collins of Highbury to represent the United Kingdom.
Thank you. Mr. President, the United Kingdom thanks Pakistan for convening this timely debate at a time when multilateralism faces unprecedented strain As the Secretary-General said, the world is witnessing more conflict than at any time since the founding of the United Nations. From Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine to the protracted crisis in Gaza, the international community is being tested. From our response must strive for peace and be guided by the principles of the UN Charter. Multilateralism remains the best tool we have to meet the shared challenges of the 21st century. And this Council, as the UN organ with the primary responsibility for international peace and security, should play a central role. That includes through collective commitment to the rule of law, including international humanitarian law and to the peaceful settlement of disputes. These are not abstract ideals. They are principles by which we could collectively prevent and resolve conflict. That is why the United Kingdom has kept these principles at the heart of its foreign policy. But as we mark the UN 80th anniversary, we must seize this moment to revitalise the peace and security architecture, champion human rights, and strengthen the UN development system and humanitarian architecture to ensure all three pillars are collectively fit for purpose. We should make full use of the UN's mediation and conflict prevention capabilities. In Sudan, we continue to urge the warring parties to engage meaningfully with existing diplomatic initiatives, including the United Nations mediation efforts, to achieve a lasting national ceasefire and political solution. Here and elsewhere, we need the United Nations to help address the root causes of conflict. Peace operations should be more adaptable, politically attuned, and better coordinated with other UN and regional actors, leveraging new technologies and local expertise. We must focus not only on brokering peace, but on sustaining it. The United Nations' efforts to verify the implementation of the peace agreement in Colombia is a good example of this work in the field. And here in New York, we can make better use of the UN peace-building architecture to support national efforts to sustain peace. Underscoring this, we must recall that, crucially, sustainable peace can only be achieved through inclusive peace processes with the full, equal, meaningful and safe participation of women. Mr. President, the UN Charter is our shared foundation. In this moment of global uncertainty, we must recommit to multilateralism, not as a slogan, but as a strategy. The United Kingdom stands ready to work with all member states to this end, including to uphold peace, security, and the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency Lord Collins, for your candid statement. I would now give the floor to Somalia.
Mr. President, at the outset, allow me to express my deep appreciation to the Pakistani presidency for convening this high-level debate and to the Secretary General for his briefing. I welcome Your Excellency, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Pakistan, to New York to preside over this meeting. Pakistan's leadership in bringing us together for this important debate and the just adopted resolution is both timely and commendable. It also reaffirms your long-standing commitment to multilateralism, international peace, and peaceful settlement of disputes. Across the world, we are witnessing the painful consequences of unresolved conflicts where lives uprooted, hopes dashed, and entire regions destabilized. The world has grown weary of a cycle in which geopolitical rivalries breed division, international obligations are set aside, and Security Council resolutions too often remain unfulfilled. In this vein, I wish to make the following 4 points. First, we must confront the reality of weakened multilateralism, a cause and a symptom of so many of our collective challenges. In the aftermath of the Second World War, humanity seemed poised to establish lasting peace through goodwill, multilateralism, mediation, and arbitration. For a time, unity of purpose and global consensus brought us close to preventing destructive conflicts. Today, however, many multilateral institutions are hamstrung by outdated rules and structures. Reform cannot wait if these bodies are to respond to the complex realities of our era. Nowhere it is more evident than this body as we mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. For the Council to be truly representative and effective, Africa must be granted its long overdue place at the table, with at least 2 permanent seats as demanded by the El-Zuluini consensus. Without such renewal, our legitimacy and capacity to address conflicts will remain out of reach. Second, from the very outset of any UN mission, we must have a clear and realistic exit strategy, especially during complex political transitions. Our engagement should be purposeful and time-bound, aiming to empower local actors to sustain peace themselves. Supporting transitions cannot be reduced to providing electoral assistance or treating elections as the sole marker of democracy. The United Nations and its members must exert more efforts and investment in peace building and accompany societies through reconciliation and reform. Third, lasting peace and security depend fundamentally on respect for international law and the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. All members must uphold their obligations, resolving disputes through peaceful means, respecting sovereignty, and honoring the resolutions of this Council. Selective adherence or disregard for these principles undermine the credibility of our collective security system and erodes the trust necessary for effective multilateralism. Fourth and last, Africa's rich tradition of dialogue, mediation, and wisdom across the continent have prevented consular crises. The African Union's Silencing the Guns initiative is a testament to a collective resolve to end the scourge of wars. These initiatives deserve not just recognition, but real investment. To that end, the historic Security Council Resolution 2719 should be operationalized to ensure UN support for African Union-led peace operations is sustainable and predictable. We must recommit to empower these mechanisms to anchor lasting peace both on our continent and beyond. It is, after all, in the vital interests of this Council to ensure that its regional partners, such as the African Union, are sufficiently supported and enabled to fully discharge their responsibility as part of the global peace and security architecture. Mr. President, as we recently marked Mandela Day last week, we echo the words of this leader who embodied reconciliation and peace. I quote, "It's so easy to break down and destroy. The heroes are those who make peace and build." End of quote. Today, it's imperative to renew our commitment to multilateralism and to the Charter's vision, a world where disputes are settled not through military might, but rather by diplomacy and political solutions. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for delivering a statement on behalf of Somalia. I would now request France Representative of France to take the floor, please. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président et Monsieur le Vice-Premier ministre, et merci pour votre présence et la présidence du Pakistan. La France remercie le Pakistan pour l'organisation de ce débat ouvert et opportun, ainsi que Monsieur le Secrétaire général pour un exposé qui nous a éclairés. La recrudescence des conflits se confirme et avec elle la tentation de l'unilatéralisme. La résolution que nous venons d'adopter à l'unanimité réaffirme notre engagement en faveur du multilatéralisme et du règlement pacifique des différends. La France identifie 3 axes afin de redynamiser l'action multilatérale. Premièrement, les Nations unies doivent s'adapter pour renforcer l'efficacité de leur action. Le multilatéralisme n'est pas juste un mot, c'est une méthode. La concertation, l'organisation et la maîtrise des rivalités plutôt que la loi du plus fort dans la défense des intérêts nationaux. Les Nations unies en sont le principal pilier institutionnel. Des chantiers sont en cours pour les réformer. La France appuie ceux menés par le secrétaire général dans le cadre du 80e anniversaire des Nations unies pour renforcer l'efficience de l'organisation et l'adapter aux réalités contemporaines. Elle promeut la nécessaire réforme du Conseil de sécurité qui doit accroître sa représentativité, dont celle des pays africains parmi les membres permanents. Elle porte en outre depuis 2015, conjointement avec le Mexique, une initiative d'encadrement du veto en cas d'atrocité de masse, rejointe par 107 États, pour que le Conseil ne soit pas empêché d'agir dans de telles situations. Le monde n'accepte pas que notre Conseil reste bloqué sur la situation à Gaza ou encore l'invasion de l'Ukraine. Deuxièmement, le Conseil de sécurité doit pleinement assumer ses responsabilités. Le chapitre 6 de la Charte confère au Conseil de sécurité des instruments dédiés en matière de règlement pacifique des différends. Lorsqu'il parvient à parler d'une seule voix, il connaît des succès significatifs. L'accord de paix de 2016, conclu en Colombie entre le gouvernement et les FARC, et dont les Nations unies accompagnent la mise en œuvre sur la décision du Conseil de sécurité, en témoigne. Le Conseil de sécurité doit avoir recours à l'intégralité des instruments à sa disposition, en s'appuyant aussi sur les organisations régionales, sur la société civile, sur les femmes et sur l'ensemble des acteurs locaux. Au Soudan, le Conseil doit agir de manière plus décisive pour favoriser le retour à la paix. S'agissant d'Haïti, la France souhaite poursuivre le travail avec l'ensemble des membres du Conseil pour renforcer l'implication des Nations unies et rétablir la sécurité dans le sens des recommandations du secrétaire général. Troisièmement, la communauté internationale doit rester mobilisée pour faire respecter le droit international. La France salue la contribution de la Cour internationale de justice au règlement pacifique des différends, aussi bien en matière contentieuse qu'à titre consultatif. Le respect du droit international, à commencer par le droit international humanitaire et le droit international des droits de l'homme, si dangereusement bafoué ces derniers temps, est une des pierres angulaires de la prévention et du règlement des conflits. C'est le sens de l'engagement de la France comme cofondateur de l'initiative mondiale portée par le CICR visant à revitaliser l'engagement politique en faveur du droit international humanitaire. C'est aussi celui en faveur de la lutte contre l'impunité partout dans le monde. Monsieur le Vice-Premier ministre, à la tribune de l'Assemblée générale en septembre dernier, le Président de la République avait parlé de, je le cite, « la plus grande convergence de crise en 8 décennies d'existence de l'ONU ». Il nous revient d'y faire face en faisant prévaloir le droit et la diplomatie sur la force, la coopération et la concertation sur l'unilatéralisme. Contre les illusions destructrices de pseudo-solutions par la force, notre Conseil doit incarner ce choix fondateur de la résolution pacifique des différends. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of France. I would now give the floor to His Excellency, the representative of China, the Council member.
谢谢主席。中方高度赞赏巴基斯坦倡议召开此次公开辩论会，欢迎达尔副总理兼外长来纽约主持会议。感谢古特雷斯秘书长所做的通报。中方欢迎安理会一致通过关于加强和平解决争端机制的决议。80年前，世界反法西斯战争取得伟大胜利， 联合国宪章的签署确立了国际关系基本准则，彰显了人类消弭战祸、维护世界和平的共同理想。80年后的今天，世界进入新的动荡变革期，和平与发展事业仍然任重道远。国际社会应当以联合国成立80周年为契机，重温初心，重振多边主义，为维护国际和平与安全做出不懈努力。我讲以下几点：第一，坚持和平解决争端。国家之间难免存在矛盾和摩擦，但施压制裁甚至付诸武力，往往事与愿违，只会引发更大的冲突，积累更多的仇恨。各国应当尊重彼此的国家主权和领土完整，重视对方的合理安全关切，以互谅互让化解交锋对。第二，遵守联合国宪章宗旨和原则。当今世界冲突对抗那么多，不是因为宪章过时了，而是因为宪章的宗旨和原则没有得到真正的遵守。宪章是国际秩序不可撼动的基石，不是可以随意取舍的菜单。国际社会应摒弃以强凌弱的丛林法则，践行主权平等、不干涉内政、和平解决争端等宪章原则，坚持大小国家一律平等，维护国际公平正义。第三，保障安理会有效履职。安理会承担着维护国际和平与安全的首要责任。面对重大危机和冲突，安理会应当坚决履行宪章赋予的职责，及时采取有效行动。安理会成员要超越一己私利，以共同利益为重，要摒弃地缘政治，以团结合作为盼。安理会通过的决议具有法律效益，应当不折不扣地执行，不能搞选择性适用，更不能搞双重标准。联合国秘书长和秘书长特使、特别代表在斡旋调解方面发挥着重要作用，应同安理会形成合力。第四，支持全球南方发挥积极作用。全球南方国家大多有过被侵略、被殖民、被掠夺的苦难经历，深知和平的宝贵，是世界大变局中稳定、向善、进步的力量。中国、巴西等全球南方国家就乌克兰危机成立和平之友小组，金砖国家就巴以问题等重大热点问题积极发声，为政治解决危机贡献力量。各方要继续支持非盟、东盟、阿盟等地区组织同联合国深化伙伴关系，在本地区冲突解决方面发挥主导作用。主席，在和平与安全问题上，中国是世界上记录最好的大国。习近平主席提出全球安全倡议，倡导共同、综合、合作、可持续的安全观，为破解安全赤字提供实践路径。中方坚持劝和促谈，积极探索中国特色热点问题解决之道，为联合国维和行动作出重大贡献。中方同30多个国家成立国际调解院，为完善全球安全治理提供重要法治公共产品，欢迎更多国家积极参加。当今世界变乱交织，通向和平的道路并非坦途。 中方愿同各方一道，践行真正的多边主义，始终做世界和平的建设者、全球发展的贡献者、国际秩序的维护者，推动构建人类命运共同体，共同开创人类更加美好的未来。谢谢主席。
Thank you, Excellency, Representative of China. Now I give the floor to Excellency, Representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Secretary General for his valuable briefing and for his clarion call to action. Deputy Prime Minister Dar, thank you for your presence today. The peaceful settlement of disputes strikes to the very core of our work at the Security Council. Denmark commends Pakistan for bringing that to the forefront today. We also congratulate Pakistan for the important resolution we have adopted this morning. Mr. President, in joining the United Nations, every member state undertakes a solemn commitment to uphold the UN Charter, to promote and defend its principles, its purposes, and its values. Today, that commitment is threatened like never before. We believe it's high time not only to recommit to these principles and values, but to take concrete steps to implement them. The peaceful settlement of disputes encompasses a broad range of actions, from the use of diplomacy, dialogue, and mediation, to taking confidence-building measures, from early warning mechanisms to crisis management measures. We have these tools at our disposal. We have recommitted to them in the Pact for the Future. What is needed, as ever, is the political will and the courage to use them. Denmark believes that these tools are underutilized and undervalued. Allow me to highlight several recommendations to this end. First, the good offices of the Secretary General and his envoys is a vital role and an important tool to promote the peaceful resolution of disputes. This instrument requires adequate resources to lead and support mediation and preventive diplomacy. It should be actively used in a bold and forward-leaning way, even when the risks of failing are high. We also underscore the ability of the Secretary General to bring matters to the attention of the Council in Article 99 of the Charter as an important tool in prevention. Second, we, the Member States, must fulfill our obligations under Article 33 and seek solutions to any dispute by peaceful means. Dialogue, preventive diplomacy, and mediation must become our first ports of call. Failing this, there are still other avenues. Legal disputes should, as a general rule, be referred to the International Court of Justice, and we encourage all Member States to accept the compulsory jurisdiction of the Court. As the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, the ICJ has an increasingly important role in upholding international law and the peaceful settlement of disputes. Third, we, the Security Council, need to utilize all means and measures at our disposal to deliver on our mandate. Chapter 6 of the Charter provides a range of tools to this end. As an example, the Council may establish investigations into disputes or situations that might lead to conflict. Such investigations should be initiated early to avoid and prevent escalation. The Council should also make more use of its authority to call on parties to settle their dispute by peaceful means and to make recommendations on procedures that could be taken. In this regard, we underscore the obligations in Article 27.3, stating that in decisions under Chapter 6, a party to a dispute shall abstain from voting. Our credibility depends not only on our ability to resolve and settle disputes, but in our ability to foresee and critically to forestall them. That means investing more in prevention and peace building, including confidence-building measures. It also means supporting civil society, grassroots organizations, and youth initiatives, and ensuring women's full, equal, meaningful, and safe participation in peace and security efforts. Concretely, the Council should consider organizing horizon scanning and situational awareness briefings and considering early responses. When the warning signs are clear, our resolve must be firm. Such an approach could save lives, resources, and decades of development gains. In closing, Mr. President, in this organization, we have all committed to saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war, but commitments on paper will save no one. Now is the time to maximize our use of the tools provided under the Charter. Let us harness the full potential and uphold our responsibility to maintain international peace and security. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, representative of Denmark. I would now give the floor to His Excellency, the representative of Russian Federation.
Господин председатель, уважаемый господин министр, благодарим делегацию Пакистана за организацию открытых дебатов, посвященных укреплению международного мира и безопасности на основе принципов многосторонности и мирного разрешения споров. Благодарим генерального секретаря за брифинг. Мы поддержали подготовленную пакистанскими коллегами резолюцию на этот счет. Процесс согласования документа осложнялся попытками отдельных членов политизировать этот сюжет. Отмечаем усилия авторов инициативы, которые в конечном счете не пошли у них на поводу и не позволили превратить эту резолюцию в плацдарм для продвижения секретариатом ООН механизмов предотвращения конфликтов, неподконтрольных государствам-членам. Как заседание, так и принятый документ призваны привлечь внимание к принципу мирного разрешения международных споров, которому Российская Федерация придает большое значение. Государства обязаны урегулировать разногласия с использованием средств и механизмов, согласованных между ними. Эта цель была поставлена во главу угла и при создании Организации Объединенных Наций. При этом мы убеждены, что обеспечение международного мира и безопасности возможно только при условии строгого и добросовестного соблюдения всех принципов международного права в их совокупности и неразрывной взаимосвязи, а также добросовестно. Избранный отдельными государствами курс на игнорирование этого постулата и сознательную политизацию механизмов разрешения споров не только приводит к росту напряженности международных отношений, но и способен нанести непоправимый ущерб деятельности важнейших судебных и арбитражных институтов. Мирное разрешение международных споров, которому посвящено сегодняшнее обсуждение, закреплено в главе 6 Устава ООН. Этот принцип переподтверждается в ряде авторитетных консенсусных документов Генеральной Ассамблеи, включая Декларацию 1970 года о принципах международного права и Манильскую декларацию 1982 года о мирном разрешении международных споров. Статья 33 Устава ООН предусматривает широкий набор средств, включая переговоры, обследование, посредничество, примирение, арбитраж, судебное разбирательство, обращение к региональным органам или соглашениям, а также иные мирные средства по выбору сторон. Суверенные государства свободны в выборе мирных средств разрешения споров. Ни отдельные средства, ни их сочетания не могут им навязываться. Право Совета Безопасности рекомендовать сторонам соответствующее решение должно реализовываться прагматично, с учетом специфики каждой конкретной ситуации, с глубоким пониманием исторического и регионального контекста, а также первопричин возникновения спора. Убеждены, что без соблюдения принципов добросовестности и согласия сторон эффективное разрешение споров невозможно в принципе. Очевидно, что решения, вынесенные механизмами, на задействование которых одна или обе стороны не давали согласия, изначально нелегитимны и не будут исполняться. Не менее значимы принципы уважения государственного суверенитета и невмешательства во внутренние дела. Любые формы внешнего давления, манипулирования процедурами и избирательные подходы способны подорвать авторитет международных механизмов, низведя их до инструментов геополитической борьбы. Подобная деградация хорошо заметна на примере учреждения международной уголовной юстиции, на которую международным сообществом когда-то возлагались большие надежды. В этой связи наша общая задача – защитить от злоупотребления и манипуляций Международный суд ООН, главный судебный орган Всемирной организации. Его авторитет и эффективность напрямую зависят от независимости и беспристрастности, тех качеств, которые суду удалось сохранить, несмотря на попытки вовлечь его в сомнительные политические авантюры. Возросшая нагрузка на суд является показателем высокого уровня доверия со стороны государства. Вместе с тем, его финансирование остается абсолютно несоразмерным его значимости и объему, а также масштабу возложенных на него задач. Считаем принципиально важным обеспечить Международному суду необходимую поддержку со стороны государств-членов, особенно на фоне инициативы Генерального секретаря ООН-80. Призываем перераспределить ресурсы в пользу именно тех органов, которые действительно работают на укрепление международного права. Международный суд в этом плане, безусловно, заслуживает соответствующей поддержки. Господин председатель, тема предотвращения конфликтов, посредничества, добрых услуг – одна из самых популярных в ООН. Для многих государств и секретариата ООН она является приоритетом. При этом мы наблюдаем парадокс. При полной поддержке на словах находящиеся в конфликте государства зачастую не горят желанием делегировать эти полномочия ООН, рассматривая это как вмешательство во внутренние дела. Да и сама ООН постепенно сдает свои позиции как наиболее активный посредник международных конфликтов, отговариваясь отсутствием влияния или геополитическими противоречиями. Другой пример, получивший отражение в принятой сегодня резолюции, метод раннего предупреждения. Эта концепция нами не поддерживается, поскольку в большинстве случаев она продвигалась под вывеской необходимости вмешаться в ситуацию по политическим мотивам, отвечающим задачам только одной группы стран. Уверены в том, что эффективность усилий секретариата ООН в области превентивной дипломатии основывается на доверии. Многие страны в открытую ставят под сомнение их беспристрастность, отказываясь от размещения миссий на своей земле. Некоторые рассматривают их как внешне навязанные механизмы, продвигающие повестку, оторванную от национальных приоритетов и как минимум бесполезную, или, что хуже, как инструмент давления. Полагаем, что в этих странах обеспокоенность вопросами суверенитета и национального лидерства не учитывалась ООН в должной мере. Уверены в том, что для решения этой проблемы секретариат и его полевые присутствия должны вернуться к подлинной беспристрастности в соответствии со статьями 100 и 101 Устава ООН. Кроме того, усилия ООН не должны быть перегружены задачами, отражающими идеологическую повестку какой-либо группы стран. Не умаляем значимости деятельности в области миростроительства, обеспечения гендерного равенства, противодействия секс-насилию, помощи развитию и преодолению климатических изменений. Однако эти вопросы никак не могут быть в центре политических посреднических усилий ООН. Пора, наконец, осознать, что никаких универсальных индикаторов конфликта не существует. А вопрос, к сожалению, возникает, если, например, посмотреть на сферу приложения усилий резервной группы старших консультантов по вопросам посредничества, где во главу угла ставятся именно эти второстепенные темы. Еще одной тенденцией последнего времени считаем хроническое неуважение и неисполнение достигнутых в результате мирных усилий и договоренностей, включая резолюции Совета Безопасности. Заключить договоренности мало, необходимо обеспечить выполнение. За примерами далеко ходить не надо. То, что произошло с Минскими соглашениями, которые подписали, по словам европейских лидеров, именно для того, чтобы не исполнять и затянуть время, у всех перед глазами. Это как раз самый яркий пример провала предотвращения конфликта. Еще одним важным элементом мирного разрешения споров, к которому надо обязательно присмотреться, является опора на достоверные данные. Приметой настоящего времени стало распространение непроверенной информации, а иногда и откровенной дезинформации через СМИ и НПО. Зачастую такие ангажированные данные просачиваются и в документы ООН и активно используются сотрудниками организации. Важно пресечь эту тенденцию. Таким образом, разнообразие средств мирного разрешения споров предоставляет государствам широкие возможности для урегулирования возникающих между ними разногласий. Однако достижение желаемого результата возможно лишь при условии их добросовестного и согласованного применения самими сторонами спора без навязанных извне решений. Мы искренне заинтересованы в восстановлении центральной роли Всемирной организации в поддержании мира и безопасности мирными методами с учетом главной ответственности ее Совета Безопасности в этой сфере. Надеемся, что и секретариатом, и Советом будут своевременно сделаны соответствующие выводы. Благодарю вас.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of Russian Federation. I would now give floor to Excellency, the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to welcome your presence and congratulate Pakistan for the presidency of the Security Council for the month of July. I would also like to thank the Secretary General for his briefing. Mr. President, the promotion of international peace and security through multilateralism and peaceful settlement of disputes lies at the heart of the United Nations Charter and should remain a common priority for all member states. Having recently marked the 80th anniversary of the UN, we cannot but reflect on the tremendous toll of World War II on countries like Greece and the firm belief that conflicts and wars should and can be averted. Greece proudly was among the first countries to sign the UN Charter, becoming thus a founding member of the United Nations. The peaceful settlement of disputes is among the very principles that form the bedrock of the UN. Greece fully adheres to the principle of peaceful settlement on international disputes and seeks to promote a wide array of tools for their prevention and resolution based on the primacy of international law as set out in Chapter 6 of the UN Charter. Moreover, Greece is a firm proponent of the rules-based multilateral system, which stipulates that the UN members should refrain from the threat or use of force against other members. We believe that respect for international law and commitment to the principle of good neighborly relations are of paramount importance for safeguarding and strengthening peace and security. Greece, as a credible and steady force, as well as a pillar of stability in its region, has always been committed on the prohibition of the threat or use of force. Mr. President, allow me to offer some more reflections. First, Greece spares no effort to promote the peaceful settlement of disputes, utilizing all the tools enshrined in the Charter and participating in relevant initiatives. The respect of international law and the promotion of good neighborly relations remain the solid basis of this endeavor, and we emphatically call on all member states to uphold the same principles as the only viable way for peaceful coexistence, prosperity, and stability. At the same time, the implementation of Security Council resolutions by all member states and international organizations is an essential component for the maintenance of international peace and security. It is also crucial that all member states respect international law and adhere to all major conventions, as Greece has done. Second, during our tenure in the Security Council, we are determined to work in an efficient and productive way in order to further promote the peaceful settlement of disputes and the respect for international law and the UN Charter, long-standing principles of Greek foreign policy. Guided by the triptych dialogue, diplomacy, and democracy, the motto of our tenure as an elected member of the Security Council for 2025-2026, Greece brings a principled voice to this table. These are not just words, but the core tenets of our foreign policy and of our Security Council participation as an elected member. In this context, we seek to act as a reliable and constructive interlocutor with all UN member states, maintaining open channels of communication not only with our neighbors, but the whole international community. Lastly, Mr. President, an increasing number of disputes across the continents continues to require our collective attention and engagement. 2025 offers an opportunity to collectively reflect on the accomplishments of the organization and to build on solid values, reiterating our steadfast support for the UN Charter and international law. As staunch supporter of multilateralism and international law, with the UN at its core, Greece remains committed to promoting peaceful dispute settlement as the only viable way for sustaining peace. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of Greece. I would now give a floor to Excellency, the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister Dar, for convening this important debate, and I also thank the Secretary General for his briefing. 80 years ago, in the wake of the devastation of 2 world wars, the United States convened the nations of the world to envision a better future. They formed the United Nations with the aim of saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Those nations recognized that even in a peaceful world, disputes would still arise among states, but they determined that disputes could and must be resolved peacefully. The United States firmly believes in this basic founding principle enshrined in the UN Charter. Across the globe, the United States continues to work with parties to disputes, wherever possible, to find peaceful solutions. In the past 3 months alone, we have seen U.S. leadership deliver de-escalations between Israel and Iran, between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, and between India and Pakistan. The United States, under President Trump's leadership, played an important role in encouraging the parties to reach these resolutions, which we applaud and support. We call on all UN member states involved in disputes or conflicts to follow the example of those countries and to make every effort to resolve their disputes and cease violence. Mr. President, in particular, we call for a ceasefire in Ukraine. Russia must cease its attacks on civilians and fulfill its obligations under the Charter. We call on other UN member states to stop providing Russia with the means to continue its aggression. The war must end. Mr. President, for peaceful dispute settlement processes to be credible, their outcomes must be implemented. We again call on China to abide by the 2016 ruling of the Arbitral Tribunal convened under the 1982 Law of the Sea Convention, which is both final and legally binding on China and the Philippines. For 9 years now, China has refused to live up to its obligations as a party to the convention. Instead, China has continued to publicly reject the ruling, interfere with the exercise of high seas freedoms as reflected in the convention, and assert expansive and unlawful claims that infringe on the sovereign rights and jurisdictions of other South China Sea littoral states, including the Philippines, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam. We once again condemn China's expansive and unlawful maritime claims in the South China Sea and the dangerous and destabilizing ways it attempts to enforce them. Colleagues, over the years, the international community has developed robust mechanisms to help states reach agreements. However, some of these mechanisms are flawed, as they are subject to bias against particular countries or seek to exceed their jurisdiction to the detriment of the sovereignty of all states, another principle in the UN Charter. The United States staunchly opposes such overreach, even as we support true contributions to international peace and security. It is critically important that institutions and structures aimed at facilitating the peaceful settlement of disputes operate with due regard for the state's sovereignty and the principles enshrined in the UN Charter. The United States is ready to continue working with the United Nations and with other UN member states to support peaceful means of resolving differences. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of the United States. I will now give the floor to Excellency, the representative of Sri Lanka.
Mr. President, Your Excellency, Senator Mohammed Ishaq Dar, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, Sri Lanka commends the Islamic Republic for convening this timely and significant high-level open debate and for facilitating the resolution adopted today. Today's debate reinforces one of the core purposes and principles of the United Nations, the promotion of international peace and security through international cooperation and the peaceful settlement of disputes as enshrined in Chapter 6, Articles 33 to 38 of the Charter of the United Nations. We also express appreciation to the Secretary General for his insightful briefing. As a country that endured the horrors of conflict and now enjoys the dividends of peace, Sierra Leone speaks from experience. Our transition from civil war to stability was made possible through regional and multilateral cooperation, including action and the good offices of the United Nations, the pivotal role of ECOWAS and the African Union, supporting inclusive national dialogue and ownership. The journey started with a leadership decision to mediate amidst brutality and resentment. It is now a journey that testifies to the promises of the Charter that with political will and international solidarity, peace is possible, sustainable, and transformative. Our commitment to multilateralism is unwavering. As an elected member of this Council and a nation that has gained from the Peace Building Commission's support, we continue to promote inclusive dialogue, reconciliation, justice, and national ownership of peace processes. Our foreign policy and global engagement are inspired by the UN Charter, as well as the Bandung Principles, the African Union Constitutive Framework, and the enduring principle of solidarity among nations. Sierra Leone believes that this body needs to be urgently reformed, a view that underscores our commitment to the Common African Position on the Security Council reform as put forward by the African Union. Mr. President, 80 years ago, the United Nations emerged from the ashes of global war with a solemn promise to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. For over 8 decades, multilateralism has helped prevent conflicts, resolve disputes, and foster development. However, persistent inequalities, geopolitical tensions, and new global challenges, from climate insecurity to technological disruption, demand that we renew and reinforce our collective commitment. In this regard, Sierra Leone wishes to highlight 4 key points. First, the Security Council must move from rhetoric to action. Principles must be backed by practice. Chapter 6 of the Charter offers an extensive toolkit for peaceful dispute resolution, including negotiation, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, the good offices of the Secretary General, and judicial settlement. These tools are not mere aspirations. They are binding instruments of action. Among them, judicial settlement plays a vital role, and we affirm the importance of the International Court of Justice in this respect. As the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, the ICJ provides a peaceful and legally binding mechanism for resolving interstate disputes and upholding international law. Sierra Leone also encourages strengthened engagement between its council and regional organizations. Our experience in West Africa with ECOWAS, the African Union, and the Mano River Union has demonstrated that proximity, legitimacy, and shared values enable more agile and context-specific responses. This regional global complementarity is central to African peace and security architecture and aligns with the principles of subsidiarity and solidarity. Second, the Security Council must improve its follow-up and implementation of adopted resolutions. This means proactive monitoring, regular briefings by special envoys and mediators, and avoiding selective engagement based on geopolitical interests. We must overcome challenges of non-compliance, weak enforcement, and council divisions. Durable peace requires consistency, credibility, and a principled approach. Additionally, the Council and the broader UN system must also address root causes such as marginalization and non-inclusion of minorities, governance gaps, and competition over resources, which often lie at the heart of disputes. Third, the Secretary General should be fully empowered to act early and decisively. We support the use of Article 99 in instances where emerging crises
threaten international peace and security. The good offices of the Secretary General must be actively used to facilitate dialogue and escalation, as was exhibited last week on the Cyprus question. We call for enhanced cooperation between the Secretary General and regional leaders. Regional diplomacy and quiet back-channel engagement often lay the groundwork for official mediation. We also underscore the need for adequate and sustained funding for DIPA's mediation work and standby team of senior mediation advisors, which remains a valuable tool. Fourth and finally, we must shift from reactive crisis management to proactive conflict prevention. Preventive diplomacy should be institutionalized through consent-driven horizon scanning, early warning briefings, and partnerships with regional organizations and civil society. The Pact for the Future, particularly Actions 13 through 18, offers a blueprint for building just, inclusive, and peaceful societies. It reaffirms the necessity of dialogue, mutual understanding, and the peaceful settlement of disputes among states. Sierra Leone is committed to supporting the implementation of these actions in both word and deed. Our post-conflict peace-building efforts, including the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, hybrid accountability mechanisms, and community-based reconciliation, have provided a model of restorative justice. We now share these lessons through South-South cooperation, peer exchanges, and mediation training. Previously on the Security Council's agenda and now a member of the Council, Sierra Leone is both a witness to the power of multilateralism and an advocate for its future. We reiterate our belief in the enduring relevance of the Bandung principles, including mutual respect for sovereignty, non-interference, equality, and peaceful coexistence. These values, shared across the developing world, remain central to global peace and security architecture. Let us not wait for the outbreak of conflict before we act. Let us use the tools of diplomacy, solidarity, and justice. We must remain committed to upholding the principles of the Charter, advance the rule of law, and strengthen multilateralism as the cornerstone of a more peaceful, equitable, and secure world. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of Sierra Leone. I would now request and give the floor to Excellency, the representative of Guyana.
I welcome you to the Security Council, Your Excellency Senator Mohammed Ishaq Dar, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan, and commend Pakistan on choosing this subject for today's open debate. I also thank Secretary General Guterres for his powerful message. Mr. President, the formation of the United Nations 80 years ago was driven by the catastrophe of 2 world wars, which brought untold sorrow to mankind. Multilateralism triumphed as world leaders unite across geopolitical divides to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Consequently, the UN's primary purpose, as stated at the very beginning of the Charter, was the maintenance of international peace and security, and to that end, I quote, taking effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to the peace and for the suppression of acts of aggression or other breaches of the peace, and to bring about by peaceful means and in conformity with the principles of justice and international law, adjustment or settlement of international disputes or situations which might lead to breach of the peace, unquote. Today, as the UN approaches its 80th anniversary, we see the highest number of conflicts since World War II, creating untold suffering for millions of people. The core humanitarian principles aimed at protecting innocent civilians are being violated, and the protections afforded humanitarian personnel, which are considered sacred, are being grievously eroded. We need not look any further than what is taking place in Gaza today, even though many other examples abound. Mr. President, the international community must encourage all parties to conflict to settle their dispute using the comprehensive menu of options under Article 33 of the Charter, which includes negotiation, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, judicial settlement, resort to regional agencies or arrangements, or other peaceful means of their own choice. History has shown that states that have chosen to resolve their disputes through peaceful means have seen many positive outcomes. The international system needs more states in conflict to choose this path. Indeed, it must be underscored that in every instance where there has been conflict and war, the resolution has inevitably come through one of the very means offered in the Charter, most often negotiation and mediation, leading to ceasefires or peace agreements. Sadly, by this time, too many would have lost their lives, and critical infrastructure would have been destroyed, requiring immense resources for rebuilding. In Guyana, we too have chosen peace through our application to the International Court of Justice, pursuant to Article 33 of the Charter, in relation to an unlawful claim to 2/3 of our territory. Mr. President, as the foremost body entrusted with the maintenance of international peace and security, the Security Council has a central role in ensuring that disputes are resolved peacefully and must deliver on its responsibilities. There must be greater consistency in the Council's approaches and insistence on the implementation of international law and Security Council resolutions. As the Council faces growing criticisms for inaction, concerted efforts must be made to rebuild trust in the Council and greater use made of the tools available in the Charter to prevent or end disputes and to address non-compliance. Accountability and justice are also crucial to the achievement of peace and security. The Security Council must speak with one voice in championing respect for international law and staunchly support the international judicial bodies in carrying out their functions with independence, impartiality, and efficiency. We must also increase multilateral efforts aimed at narrowing development divides and overcoming poverty, increasing opportunity for women and young people, promoting respect for human rights, and building strong institutions. These will contribute immensely to the attainment of international peace and security. The United Nations remains central in this regard. In closing, Mr. President, I reaffirm Guyana's commitment to
I would now give the floor to Excellency, the representative of Panama.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Panamá agradece a la República Islámica de Pakistán por su convocatoria a este debate abierto que trata un tema de suma y actual importancia, el futuro del multilateralismo como herramienta para la resolución de conflictos. Damos la bienvenida a Su Excelencia Mohammad Ishaq Dar, Viceprimer Ministro y Ministro de Relaciones Exteriores de Pakistán. Saludamos y agradecemos la valiosa participación del señor Antonio Guterres, Secretario General de las Naciones Unidas, así como de los ministros de Estado y otros altos funcionarios que nos distinguen con su participación. Señor Presidente, hoy el mundo experimenta la mayor cantidad de conflictos armados concurrentes desde 1946. El agravamiento de las crisis en Ucrania, Gaza, Myanmar, Sudán, Haití, entre otros, nos envían un ominoso mensaje. Mucho nos falta por avanzar para lograr nuestra misión de consolidar la paz y seguridad internacional, e incluso pareciera que experimentamos un retroceso. La fraternidad e independencia que nos juntó hace ya 80 años con el fin de evitar que los horrores de la guerra asolasen al mundo nuevamente, resultó en la ratificación de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas y estableció las bases del sistema de gobernanza multilateral que ha perdurado hasta ahora, ayudando a reducir la pobreza extrema, el hambre y la inseguridad en el mundo. Sin embargo, hoy somos espectadores de una degradación gradual de este sistema, hacia uno dominado por la desconfianza mutua, la desinformación, las obstrucciones políticas, los apremios financieros y las arbitrariedades unilaterales. Resulta preocupante la falta de voluntad política para implementar las reformas e innovaciones necesarias para adaptarnos a las nuevas realidades y lidiar con conflictos cada vez más complejos. Panamá reitera su irrestricto llamado al Consejo a hacer cumplir y proteger la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. Para nuestro país, pequeño y del sur global, las Naciones Unidas fue y seguirá siendo el principal vehículo para poder internacionalizar nuestras causas, desde el traspaso del Canal de Panamá a manos panameñas hasta los esfuerzos por promover la seguridad marítima global. La naturaleza multilateral de esta organización nos ha empoderado para responder efectivamente a imposiciones arbitrarias de los países poderosos. Para nosotros, como país latinoamericano en desarrollo, resulta inconcebible un orden mundial donde los países, en lugar de trabajar juntos hacia el bien común, impongan sus intereses proteccionistas. Ante la llegada de la globalización y la creciente interconectividad entre las naciones, el aislamiento se presenta como una negación equivocada a la responsabilidad de los Estados y que reiteradamente ha demostrado no tener un impacto tangible en la preservación de la paz y seguridad global. Por el contrario, multilateralismo es el cimiento sobre el cual descansan la estabilidad y el bienestar global. No tenemos otra alternativa. Por eso necesitamos asegurar un compromiso internacional inclusivo y sin dobles estándares. El uso e interpretación selectivos del lenguaje y la terminología en la Carta de las Naciones Unidas y en el Sistema Universal de los Derechos Humanos socavan la universalidad de dichos pilares del derecho internacional y de un sistema multilateral efectivo. Además, rechazamos las rivalidades geopolíticas que superponen los intereses nacionales a costa de la cooperación multilateral. Esto es grave porque paraliza la obligación de este Consejo al impedirle adoptar acciones rápidas y contundentes que prevengan el conflicto y aseguren una resolución pacífica a las crisis globales. Señor Presidente, Panamá cree que la integridad territorial, la soberanía y el derecho de los pueblos a decidir su propio destino no está sujeto a negociación. El respeto de todos los Estados miembros a esta realidad es crítico para resolver conflictos prolongados. Sin embargo, dichas consideraciones no contradicen el carácter universal obligatorio de los derechos humanos, las libertades individuales o el mandato conferido por la Carta al Consejo de Seguridad de tomar medidas proporcionales ante los actos de injusticia, las violaciones de los derechos humanos y los crímenes de guerra. La Carta nos ha vetado al Consejo de Seguridad la potestad de velar por la promoción y el mantenimiento de la paz y seguridad internacional. Esto no es solo un simple mandato legal, sino un deber moral. El destino de vida de millones de personas sumidas en tragedia, crisis y hambruna depende de nuestro actuar. En marco del UN 80 y el Pacto del Futuro, se presenta una oportunidad importantísima para emprender un cambio profundo en la manera que hacemos cumplir nuestro mandato. Es vital hacer uso de las herramientas ya existentes e incorporar en la prevención del conflicto una perspectiva incluyente, donde las mujeres, los jóvenes, los pueblos originarios y la sociedad civil jueguen un papel clave. Apoyamos el estrechamiento de relaciones entre el Consejo de Seguridad y la Comisión de Conciliación de Paz, una plataforma que ha servido como puente crucial entre la Asamblea General y este Consejo. Llamamos a fortalecer los mecanismos de intercambio de información con el ECOSOC y con organizaciones regionales y locales que realizan labores de construcción de paz. La región latinoamericana cuenta con modelos sólidos, incluyendo la Comisión y Corte Interamericana de Derechos Humanos, la Carta Democrática de la Organización de Estados Unidos, cuenta con mecanismos basados en el principio de solución pacífica de controversias y se apoyan procedimientos como los buenos oficios, la investigación y conciliación, el arbitraje y los procedimientos judiciales. Recordemos, sin embargo, que el rol primordial en el mantenimiento del multilateralismo como herramienta efectiva de solución de conflictos radica ultimadamente en el accionar de los Estados miembros. Las propuestas no se traducirán en una disminución de los conflictos activos, ni en la erradicación de tragedias humanitarias, si no confiamos en nosotros mismos y si no colaboramos honestamente para responder a los retos globales desde el cambio climático hasta la profunda desigualdad socioeconómica mundial. Además, el uso indiscriminado del veto, la falta de representatividad del sur global y la obstrucción unilateral de consensos son obstáculos inmediatos que enfrentamos para poder cumplir nuestra labor. Panamá ve interesante las iniciativas que sugieren la necesidad de reforma al Consejo de Seguridad. Fue una mayoría de este Consejo, reunido en Panamá en 1973 como hito histórico, el que alentó a las partes a negociar con éxito un nuevo tratado para eliminar tensiones y lograr la transferencia de administración del canal a manos panameñas. Cuando existe un compromiso genuino, el Consejo puede y debe actuar como una verdadera fuerza de paz. Señor Presidente, las Naciones Unidas permanecen como piedra angular y motor del multilateralismo. Requerimos un compromiso basado en principios y una voluntad política. Los programas, mandatos y misiones serán tan efectivas como los Estados miembros les permitan. Que las crisis de hoy sirvan como advertencia de las consecuencias devastadoras de un mundo fragmentado por los extremismos, las arbitrariedades unilaterales y la falta de solidaridad. Reflexionemos y contribuyamos de manera constructiva para que la cooperación internacional prospere y seamos recordados como la generación que cimentó el multilateralismo como la vía principal hacia la paz y la seguridad global. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of Panama. Now I would give floor to Excellency, the representative of Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by acknowledging the timeliness of this meeting and then thanking His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Isaac Dar, Deputy Prime Minister and then Minister of the Foreign Affairs, for initiating this important meeting today. I also thank the Secretary General for his insightful briefing today. Mr. President, we continue to witness how complex and protracted the conflicts, driven by a range of the underlying causes, give rise to hostilities and humanitarian crises. In this context, our commitment to the peaceful settlement of the disputes must be reaffirmed, with a greater emphasis on preventive diplomacy and the use of the tools stipulated in Article 33 of the UN Charter. Let me highlight the 3 points today. First, mediation and good offices are recognized as useful tools within the range of the preventive diplomacy measures outlined in the Article 33 of the Charter. In an increasingly complex conflict landscape, these mechanisms offer timely and effective responses that can help ease tensions before they escalate and prevent the outbreak or recurrence of the violence. The UN's prompt and well-resourced and professional mediation support is therefore crucial. In this respect, we commend the work of the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and its Mediation Support Unit for providing well-timed expertise to envoys and field missions. As demand for such mediation support continues to grow, these efforts should be backed by sustained and predictable financial resources. For our part, Republic of Korea has steadily increased its support for the DPP's multi-year appeal, contributing around $3.5 million, the highest amount among donors last year. Such a contribution will help strengthen the UN's capabilities in mediation and crisis responses, and we hope the international community will continue to extend the support to the multi-year appeal. Second, expertise and growing responsibilities of the regional and sub-regional organizations should be fully utilized in every step of dispute resolution. With their deep understanding of the underlying causes of conflict, regional bodies are uniquely positioned to deliver context-specific dialogue and mediation tools. Their influence, legitimacy, and proximity make them indispensable partners in crafting sustainable peace. In this regard, we take note of the African Union for its ownership and leadership in solving African conflicts throughout the peace continuum, from the AU's Continental Early Warning System, peace support operations like AWESOME in Somalia, and Center for Post-Conflict Reconstruction and Development. With this in mind, strengthening strategic partnership between the Council and regional organizations is essential for ensuring the Council's decisions are informed by local realities, thereby reinforcing its capacity to actively respond to conflict in a sustainable and context-specific manner. Third, preventive diplomacy should go hand in hand with efforts to build inclusive and lasting peace. Preventing outbreak or relapse of conflict requires addressing its underlying causes and creating the conditions requisite for sustainable peace. Thus, this in turn calls for investments in community-based conflict resolution, early warning, early action mechanisms, and engagement of all stakeholders, including international financial institutions and the UN country teams. Such efforts must align with the national priorities and complement one another through robust coordination and communication. In this vein, we underscore the roles of the UN country teams under the leadership of the resident coordinators, as well as the Peacebuilding Commission, in coordinating efforts by various actors to enhance their impacts and synergies. For example, the Gambia's experience, marked by the strong national ownership and coordinated international support, facilitated and accompanied by the PBC, demonstrates the value of integrated approaches in sustainable peace. Mr. President, in conclusion, peaceful settlement of disputes is the first and most essential step toward the realization of the sustainable peace, as rightly pointed out the resolution we adopted today. Republic of Korea stands ready to support the UN's effort aimed at promoting preventive diplomacy through the full utilization of the Article 33 of the UN Charter. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of Republic of Korea. Now I give the floor to Excellency, the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you. Thank you, President. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister Dar, for convening today's very timely debate. We also want to thank Secretary General for his energizing briefing. Peaceful settlement of disputes is a cornerstone of international law and the United Nations Charter. As a legal and moral duty, it rests squarely with the parties involved, in particular their leaders. Drawing from our own experience, I can affirm that the peaceful resolution of any dispute requires courage, political will, determination, and time. These are often scarce commodities, especially in the moments of crisis, and must be demonstrated by all parties. It is precisely why the role of the United Nations, including the Security Council, remains vital. Using tools provided by the Charter, we can offer constructive guidance and support in helping to prevent the crisis. Slovenia welcomes the resolution adopted today, although we would have wished a stronger voice of the United Nations Security Council on this matter. Allow me to raise the following points for consideration in today's discussion. Firstly, international law must be respected, complied with, and upheld. This includes international humanitarian law, international human rights law, as well as, in a broader sense, the Security Council resolutions and all agreements and decisions reached through peaceful means, including judicial and arbitral rulings, orders, and advisory opinions. Often this Council is called upon to address complex and destabilizing situations that undermine regional stability. threaten peace and cost innocent civilian lives. This crisis frequently stems from agreements that have been broken, commitments abandoned, and the political will diminished, replaced by misguided belief that the military solution is possible. Respect for international law is not optional, nor is it something imposed on us. It is our voluntary and strong commitment, a fundamental obligation. Secondly, there is no higher price than that of recovering and rebuilding a country torn apart by conflict, where the very social fabric of communities have been torn by the horrors of war. This is why preventing conflict is not only a moral imperative to avoid the human suffering, but also a shared strategic and economic necessity that requires the commitment of all, donors large and small, public and private sector, and civil society alike. Mindful that effective and sustainable conflict prevention and peace building must be nationally led and owned, Slovenia encourages Council members to engage more in early warning efforts, including through the potential of new technologies. We should pay more attention to early indications of human rights violations and abuses. We must consider developments related to climate security, as proven useful across the West and Central Africa. The Council should collectively ensure that peace operations are guided and equipped to carry out preventive diplomacy and strengthen post-conflict democratic processes on the ground, as we have done after the civil wars in Côte d'Ivoire, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. And finally, no agreement can withstand the test of time if it is not reached through an inclusive process. A peace agreement that excludes half of the population is unlikely to endure. The root cause of disputes, such as marginalization, historical grievances, and systemic inequalities, must be reflected at the very moment when leaders are working towards a peaceful settlement. This is why Slovenia actively supports the inclusive participation of diverse civil society actors at all stages of conflict prevention, resolution, and peace building. Our commitment to the Women, Peace and Security agenda has been further reinforced through our endorsement of the UN Secretary-General's common pledge for women's full, equal, and meaningful participation in peace processes. Women mediators and those with expertise on gender dimensions, supported by Slovenia through the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund, have consistently proven their ability to help achieve fairer, more inclusive, and longer-lasting peace agreements. Agreements that the world we live in desperately needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of Slovenia. I would now give the floor to Excellency, the representative of Algeria.
Mr. President, my delegation wishes to begin by expressing its sincere appreciation to His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Ishaq Dar, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, for presiding the youth of the Council's agenda. We also thank the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, for his valuable briefing and continuing commitment to preventive diplomacy and multilateral engagement. I would further say my gratitude to the Secretary General for his principled and courageous stance in promoting, defending, and upholding multilateralism and the tenets of the UN Charter. Despite tremendous challenges and pressures, these stance remain intact regarding the terrible situation in Gaza. Let us be clear. The prolonged catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza is nothing but the reflection of the failure of our Security Council in the discharge of its primary responsibility in maintaining peace and security. The reflection of the erosion of multilateralism and the reflection of the prevalence of might over right. Mr. President, this debate is both timely and necessary as the international community faces persistent crises, complex regional tensions, and growing challenges to the rule of international law. As crises persist and unilateral approaches proliferate, Algeria reiterates its firm belief that respect by all for international law and peaceful dispute settlement are the only sustainable path to international peace and security. In this context, Algeria would want to make the following point. First, the peaceful settlement of disputes is a cornerstone of Algeria's foreign policy. Dialogue, mediation, good offices, and legal mechanisms that respect sovereignty and non-interference remain our preferred tools for preventing and resolving conflicts. Second, the Charter mechanism enshrined in Chapter 6, negotiation, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, and judicial settlement must be fully utilized and applied with impartiality. Third, we fully support the good offices of the UN Secretary General. And in the current climate of financial constraint, Algeria joins those who affirm that prevention must remain a strategic priority. In this perspective, we support a rational, equitable allocation of resources aligned with the Secretary General's UN 80 initiative. Fourth, in our regional context, at the intersection of the Maghreb, of the Sahel, and of Western Mediterranean, Algeria remains actively committed to conflict prevention and resolution in coordination with regional organizations such as the African Union. Fifth, we support closer coordination between the Security Council and the Peacebuilding Commission, particularly in addressing root causes and supporting nationally owned peacebuilding strategies. The ongoing review of the peacebuilding architecture is a good opportunity to reinforce coherence and complementarity across the UN system. We remain gravely concerned by the paralysis of the Security Council and also the selective implementation of its resolution, which undermines its legitimacy and its credibility. The question of Palestine is a clear and a long-standing example of this double standard. In conclusion, Mr. President, we call for an inclusive, equitable, and representative multilateralism that actively prioritize and strengthen the pacific settlement of disputes in full accordance with the principles, with the purposes of the UN Charter. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of Algeria. Before we start under Rule 37, giving the floor to non-council members, China has requested the floor to make a further statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
谢谢主席。我想对美国代表刚才的发言做一个简短的回应。我想强调，中国对南海诸岛及其附近海域拥有不可争辩的主权。中国在南海的领土主权和海洋权益具有充分的历史和法理依据。中方在南海仲裁案问题上的立场是一贯且明确的。中国不接受、不承认所谓的裁决，不接受任何基于该裁决的主张和行动。事实上，近年来在中国与东盟国家的共同努力下，南海局势保持着总体稳定，航行和飞越自由不存在任何问题。中方一贯坚持同有关当事国在尊重历史事实和国际法的基础上，通过对话协商妥善处理涉海分歧。反观美国，美国一直罔顾南海问题的历史经纬和客观事实，到处搬弄是非，挑拨离间，损害地区国家的互信。美国至今不加入联合国海洋法公约，但常常以公约法官的身份自居，对他国指手画脚、横加干涉，何其可笑！美方还在南海地区部署包括陆基中程导弹在内的进攻性武器，以航行自由为名，频繁派遣大规模先进舰机到南海搞军事侦察演习，公然闯入中国领海和领空。究竟是谁在搞乱南海、搞乱地区？人尽皆知。是谁在南海搞胁迫霸凌、威胁南海航行自由？不言自明。谢谢主席。
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of China. I think now we begin with the list of speakers under Rule 37. I give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Thomas Taraba, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for the Environment of Slovakia. His Excellency, Mr. Thomas Taraba.
Dear Mr. President, I wish to thank you for organizing this debate on this important issue. Slovakia aligns itself with the statement of the European Union. In addition, allow me to highlight a few points in my national capacity. First, we live in a divided world where conflicts are multiplying dramatically. Slovakia strongly appeals to states members of the United Nations to solve situations of tension and conflict and existing disputes by political and diplomatic means, and to refrain from the threat or use of force. We appeal to states in conflict to cease armed action. The closest armed conflict to our borders is the ongoing war in Ukraine. Slovakia joins international partners in calling for a full and unconditional ceasefire and the start of meaningful talks leading to a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine in line with the EU Charter. Second, peaceful settlement of disputes is central to the Security Council's mandate to maintain international peace and security. Over 8 years, the Council has helped to end numerous conflicts, including through applying the tools provided under Chapter 4 of the Charter. Slovakia fully supports the appeal to the members of the Council to make a wider and more effective use of Charter provisions aimed at peaceful settlement of disputes. The Council should also continue to build on its existing early warning and conflict prevention efforts. Third, the peaceful settlement of disputes is most effective when it is fully owned by parties directly involved and when these parties themselves choose and apply procedures and means best suited to their needs and perspectives. Slovakia is of the view that the United Nations must be adequately equipped to lend its support in this regard as appropriate. Next, I would like to stress the value of the regional and sub-regional organizations and arrangements in the Pacific settlement of regional disputes. They are close to the problem and have knowledge of local dynamics. Slovakia believes that cooperation with them ought to be further enhanced. Lastly, a point which my country believes merits further attention is the need to adjust the existing instruments for peaceful settlement of disputes to constantly evolving nature of disputes. Mr. President, Slovakia commends the ongoing peace facilitation activities of the UN Secretary General, including most recently his renewed attempt to revive the stalled Cyprus peace talks. Slovakia is prepared to continue facilitating bi-communal dialogue between Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot political parties in Cyprus. I would also take this opportunity to thank those EU member states who play important mediation role in different crisis situations around the world. Mr. President, I close by saying that despite criticism and challenges for Slovakia, the Security Council remains a vital international forum for multilateralism. The Pact for the Future, adopted by UN member states in September 2024, presents several ambitious actions to improve Council's effectiveness and ensure it remains fit for purpose. Slovakia remains committed to the successful implementation of this important document. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for the Environment of Slovakia. I would now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Maresh Sangam-Pongsa, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Thailand.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thailand congratulates Pakistan on assuming the presidencies of the Security Council this month and commends your leadership in convening this timely and important debate. We stand ready to engage constructively, drawing on Thailand's long-standing commitment to the promotions of international peace and security. Against a backdrop of rising tensions, geopolitical mistrust, and overlapping crises, Thailand is deeply concerned by the growing reliance on power projections and confrontational approaches, which risk further escalating the situation. This underscores an urgent need to redouble our collective efforts and embrace new approaches towards the peaceful settlements of disputes. Thailand wishes to address 3 key points. First, at this difficult time, our commitment to the principle enshrined in the charters of the United Nations must be strengthened. Thailand emphasizes that disputes must be solved through dialogue, mutual respect, and cooperation, while firmly upholding the principle of non-interference and respect for sovereignties and territorial integrities of states. Thailand highlights Article 33 of the Charter, which outline a broad spectrum of peaceful means for resolutions. These diversities of approaches reflects the realities that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Peaceful settlements are best pursued through mechanisms appropriate for each context, with due respect for the sovereignties and ownership of the party involved. Second, Thailand recognizes the role of the United Nations in promoting peace and nonviolence. In this spirit, multilateralism creates an enabling environment where solutions can be pursued effectively, reinforcing the legitimacies and trust that underpins peaceful settlements. We support efforts to strengthen the United Nations capacity for conflict prevention to ease global tensions by revitalizing existing mechanisms and developing innovative approaches to early warning, confidence-building measures, and dialogue, taking into consideration the specific context of each situation. In this regard, Thailand welcomes the Pact for the Future and supports the call to intensify the use of preventive diplomacies and pacific settlement of disputes, as outlined in Article 16. Thailand partnership with a partnership between the United Nations and regional organizations are critical in reducing tensions and promoting international peace and security. Their complementary role must be recognized and further promoted. Over the years, ASEAN's architectures and mechanisms has helped foster an environment of mutual trust and contributed to peace and stability beyond the Southeast Asian region. This has been achieved through ASEAN's consensus-based and non-confrontational approach, practical confidence-building measures, and a flexible approach to preventive diplomacy. We believe that ASEAN and the United Nations complement each other, and they can contribute to global efforts in strengthening peaceful settlement mechanisms, mindful of regional context and sensitivities. Mr. President, let us not lose sight of our collective responsibilities to secure peace and security for further generation. Thailand urges all parties to engage in dialogue and diplomacy in good faith as the cornerstone of conflict prevention and resolutions. We stand ready to work alongside all partners to transfer our commitments for international peace and security into lasting reality. I thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Excellency, Mr. Marosh Sen Gam Pongsa, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Minister for Economy and Commerce of Kyrgyzstan.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished steadfast advocate of the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, reiterates its full commitment to multilateralism and the peaceful resolution of disputes. Excellencies, the contemporary global landscape is marked by unprecedented and interconnected challenges, from protracted conflicts and geopolitical fragmentation to transitional threats, including climate change, terrorism, and cyber insecurity. These issues demand collective, coordinated action under the leadership of the Council. As the cornerstone of the global security architecture, the Security Council must uphold its mandate by fostering dialogue, cooperation, and mutual trust among the member states. The United Nations' strength lies in its ability to harmonize diverse perspectives into common solutions for peace. Kyrgyzstan, a landlocked country in Central Asia, has gained valuable experience in maintaining stability within a complex regional environment. We have identified inclusive governance, interethnic harmony, and sustainable development as the core foundations of our domestic stability. The same principles guide our foreign policy, which is rooted in respect, non-interference, and the peaceful resolution of disputes. We regard multilateralism essential to addressing global challenges. No single state, regardless of its size and influence, can tackle these issues alone. Therefore, Kyrgyzstan calls for strengthening the Security Council role in promoting dialogue, fostering cooperation, and developing inclusive, sustainable approaches to peace building. Mr. President, conflict prevention and mediation are not abstract concepts but practical tools for stability. Kyrgyzstan actively engages in regional initiatives across Central Asia to promote dialogue, build confidence, and uphold international law. A testament of this commitment is the full resolution of border issues between Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Through political will and compromise, we averted escalation and instead paved the way for sustainable development. We firmly assert that lasting peace requires justice, equality, and opportunity for all. Kyrgyzstan remains dedicated to the women, peace, and security agenda and the meaningful inclusion of youth in peace processes. Every voice must be heard. Moreover, climate change is an accelerant of instability, particularly in Central Asia. Addressing its security dimension is imperative. Distinguished delegates, Kyrgyzstan supports an expanded mandate for the United Nations in the areas of preventive diplomacy, mediation, and peace building, particularly in vulnerable and post-conflict regions. In this regard, we believe it is necessary to strengthen the role of the United Nations as the global coordinator of humanitarian efforts, increase the participation of small states in Security Council decision-making, ensure inclusivity and fairness in international conflict resolution mechanisms. We also support initiatives to reform the global governance system with a focus on equal participation and fair representation for all states. In conclusion, my country reaffirms its unwavering adherence to international law. We champion good neighborliness, intercultural dialogue, and collective action against transnational threats from terrorism to cyber threats. Only through unity can we secure a peaceful, just, and sustainable future for all. I thank you all.
Thank you, Excellency Mr. Bakit Sedov, Minister for Economy and Commerce of Kyrgyzstan. I now give the floor to Bulgaria, His Excellency Mr. Nikolay Pavlov, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bulgaria. Excellency, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bulgaria aligns itself with the statement to be delivered by the European Union, and I would like to make the following points in my national capacity. Bulgaria welcomes the opportunity to engage in this important high-level open debate and reaffirms its unwavering commitment to upholding the principles of the international law, ensuring in the United Nations Charter and the rules-based international order with the UN at its core as the bedrock of the effective multilateralism. However, the powerful remarks this morning reminded us that reaffirming the commitment to the UN Charter 8 decades after its adoption is not enough. Amidst growing geopolitical tensions and implementation of Agenda 2030, lagging behind, what is required is active engagement by the members of the international community with concrete actions and renewed political will to reinvigorate international cooperation and to prioritize solidarity over division and progress over paralysis. The process of negotiating and adopting the Pact of the Future serves as a powerful example in this regard. The UN Charter provides a robust framework to advance the cause of international cooperation by offering critical mechanisms to maintain international peace and security, such as negotiation, mediation, arbitration, good offices, and judicial settlement. While resolving international disputes through peaceful means remains a priority, the best way to settle a dispute is to prevent it. In this vein, Bulgaria supports strengthening the connection between early warning systems, preventive diplomacy, development cooperation, and peace-building initiatives to address potential conflicts before they emerge or escalate. In this regard, Bulgaria welcomes the EU-UN joint priorities on peace and security for the period 2025-2028, with special focus on conflict prevention and mediation. We acknowledge the role of conflict prevention as an essential component of sustaining peace and recognize the interlinkages between peace, security, development, and human rights. At the same time, we emphasize the need to ensure respect for human rights and international law, including international law of the sea, to fight terrorism and ensure women's participation in peace processes. Accountability for serious violations of international law as key conditions for a successful transition and the prevention of new conflicts. Recent developments in the Middle East confirm the importance of diplomatic initiatives to resolve complex disputes, and we welcome the negotiation for ceasefire in Gaza, spearheaded by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt, leading to a permanent end to hostilities, for the unconditional release of all hostages, and addressing the dire humanitarian situation in the Strip. Almost 4 years since Russia started its unprovoked full-scale invasion and war on aggression against Ukraine, we reaffirm our support for Ukraine's independence and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders, and for a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace based on the principles of the UN Charter and international law. Lasting peace emerges not through imposed solution, but when parties to the conflict and stakeholders pursue agreement through modalities they deem most appropriate. This principle is enshrined in the UN Charter, which rightly emphasizes the paramount importance for achieving sustainable peace. Turning now to the special responsibility that this Council holds for the maintenance of international peace and security, it is worth recalling that Article 24 of the Charter clearly spells out the way the Council should act promptly, effectively, in accordance with the purposes and principles of the United Nations, and on behalf of the United Nations member states who have vested the Council with power. Each veto or threat to use it brings mounting human suffering and serves as a call to the General Assembly to step in and not shy away from exercising its functions and powers under the UN Charter. With this in mind, Bulgaria has joined the core group of the so-called veto initiative led by Liechtenstein, welcomes the Digital Handbook Assembly for Peace, and it's of the view that the General Assembly should consistently demand the Security Council to apply the UN Charter in its entirety, including the provision to abstain from veto in Article 27.3. In closing, Bulgaria believes that the principle of the peaceful settlement of disputes forms the core of the inclusive, accountable, and effective multilateral system, one that delivers peace, democracy, and sustainable prosperity for all. It cultivates genuine partnerships, mutual respect, fosters common understanding of risks, challenges, and opportunities, upholds the established rules and principles, and brings solutions to pressing global problems. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Mr. Nikolai Pavlov, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bulgaria. Now I give the floor to Excellency, the Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Portugal.
Excellencies, Portugal aligns itself with the statement delivered by the European Union and wishes to add the following points in its national capacity. We meet today as the world faces converging crises, geopolitical fragmentation, rising conflict, and erosion of trust in institutions. This context makes the peaceful settlement of disputes not only a legal imperative, but a political and moral one. Multilateralism, with the UN at its core, must be strengthened and adapted to a more complex and polarized global landscape. As we navigate UN 80, this means a UN system that is coherent, anticipatory, and inclusive. Portugal believes that the Council's effectiveness must be matched by stronger upstream capacities across the UN system, from special political missions and the Secretary-General's good offices to resident coordinators and peace and development advisors. These actors must be empowered, resourced, and better connected to regional and local peacemaking efforts. We also reaffirm our commitment to mediation and preventing diplomacy, long-standing pillars of Portugal's foreign policy. As a recent member of the Group of Friends of Mediation, we support peer learning across regions and inclusive, locally rooted approaches. Trust and access are critical in today's mediation efforts, and these must be fostered through transparency, listening, and proximity to affected communities. We have also engaged within the Community of Portuguese-Speaking Countries, CPLP, to promote political dialogue and cooperation among member states. Besides, we particularly highlight the role of women and youth in peace processes. Portugal is a strong supporter of the Common Pledge for Women's Participation and remains committed to advancing Resolution 1325 as it marks this year its 25th anniversary. We are equally supportive of efforts to expand mediator networks in the UN and strengthen regional capacities. Excellencies, diplomacy is essential but not sufficient. Peaceful dispute resolution also rests on the early detection of risks, sustained political commitment, and the legitimacy born of trust and inclusion. It requires defending the role of international law, especially the International Court of Justice, but also ensuring that a party to a dispute abstains from voting, in line with Article 27(3) of the UN Charter. And it requires that we match ambition with implementation, including through the Pact for the Future, whose Action 16 offers a blueprint to reinforce the UN's role in mediation and trust building. Portugal will continue to act as a bridge builder through our development cooperation efforts, our engagement with regional organizations, and our promotion of prevention and good offices, including, if elected to the Security Council next year, for the mandate 2027-2028. We stand ready to work with all partner member states, regional organizations, and civil society to make peaceful settlements not the exception but the norm. And we, to conclude, thank the Pakistan for this initiative, the Pakistani presidency for this initiative, and I thank you all for the attention.
Thank you, Excellency. Ms. Anna Isabel Rever, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Portugal. I now give the floor to His Excellency His Excellency Mr. Kazim Gharib Abadi, Deputy Foreign Minister for Legal and International Affairs of Islamic Republic of Iran. Excellency, of the floor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, at the outset, I wish to express my appreciation to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan in his capacity as President of the Security Council for convening this important meeting. In the current delicate global context, the subject under discussion assumes a significance greater than ever before. Regrettably, the international community is increasingly confronted with the rise of unilateralism, the instrumentalization of sanctions, the flagrant violation of the United Nations Charter, and a growing disregard for the rule of international law. Mr. President, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 32, the Holy Quran says, and I quote, "We decreed to the children of Israel that if anyone kills a person, unless in retribution for murder or spreading corruption in the land, it is as if he kills all mankind, while if any saves a life, it is as if he saves the lives of all mankind." Unquote. Since the establishment of the United Nations and throughout the 8 decades of the Security Council's operations, more than 300 wars and armed conflicts have transpired, resulting in tens of millions of casualties and injuries. Dozens of legitimate governments have been overthrown as a consequence of foreign interventions, primarily by the United States. In its capacity as a permanent member of the Council, the U.S. has vetoed more than 80 draft resolutions of the Security Council. The Israeli regime, which has gone so far as to weaponize even food and water against innocent civilians, including children, has over the past 8 decades carried out more than 3,000 terrorist operations, displaced over 7 million Palestinians, martyred and wounded hundreds of thousands, and imprisoned more than 1 million Palestinians. This is the very same regime that has launched military aggression against its neighbors, remains a party to none of the international instruments on disarmament and non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and maintains hundreds of nuclear warheads in its arsenal. And you are well aware of the catastrophic consequences that the possession of nuclear weapons by such a criminal regime entails for international peace and security. During this very same period, and notwithstanding the United States' unconditional support for this regime and its exercise of the veto against more than 55 draft resolutions submitted to the Security Council in response to the regime's atrocities, over 550 resolutions have been adopted against it by the United Nations General Assembly, the United Nations Security Council, and the Human Rights Council. Yet none has been implemented due to the political shielding extended by certain states and purport to champion human rights and the cause of international peace and security. Mr. President, with such a heinous record of crime and aggression, in the early hours of 13 June 2025, the Zionist regime, under the command of a war criminal against whom an arrest warrant has been issued by the International Criminal Court, launched an act of aggression in flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations and the fundamental principles of international law, initiating armed attacks against the Islamic Republic of Iran. The United States, a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, subsequently and in full complicity with the aggressor regime, conducted a series of strikes against 3 of Iran's safeguarded peaceful nuclear installations under the auspices of the International Atomic Energy Agency. In a statement steeped in deceit, the representative of the regime, addressing this council on June 20, claimed that the military aggression against Iran had been carried out in full conformity with international law, in adherence to the principles of distinction and proportionality, and that only military targets had been struck. I hereby inform the Security Council that the military aggression and campaign of familial assassinations carried out by the regime in question have resulted in the martyrdom of 1,100 individuals, including 132 women, 45 children, and 26 members of medical and healthcare personnel, the injury of 5,750 others, the destruction of more than in Tehran, martyring over 70 innocent individuals, including family members of the detainees. In another act of aggression, in an attempt to assassinate a university professor, the regime martyred 15 members of his family. In yet another armed assault, the very same regime struck a 14-story residential building, martyring 60 people, among them 20 children. Mr. President, in a letter dated 27th June addressed to the President of the Security Council, the representative of the United States, in an audacious attempt to justify its aggression against Iran's safeguarded peaceful nuclear facilities, shamelessly claimed that the strikes had been conducted within the framework of Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations, allegedly to neutralize the threat posed by Iran's nuclear program to the Israeli regime and international peace and security. Allow me to address these populist and deceitful assertions directly. First, Iran has not, over the course of recent centuries, initiated armed aggression against any state. We have not threatened the United States with military attack. We maintain no military bases in proximity to the United States. In a stark contrast, the United States possesses over 5,000 nuclear warheads, an inhuman weapon it has in fact employed against innocent civilians in Japan. It operates more than 700 military bases across over 130 countries, with several 100,000 deployed forces. It has established multiple military installations in the Persian Gulf region and around the borders of Iran. Thus, who is truly the threat to international peace and security, Iran or the United States of America? Second, Iran's nuclear program has always been exclusively peaceful in nature and has remained subject to the most rigorous oversight of the International Atomic Energy Agency. For over 3 decades, the Zionist regime has propagated the claim that Iran seeks to develop nuclear weapons, thereby deceiving certain countries and manipulating public opinion. But where, indeed, is this alleged nuclear bomb? Is it not patently absurd that a regime which itself possesses every category of weapons of mass destruction is party to none of the relevant international instruments and whose 8 decades record is replete with aggression, atrocity, and barbarism, now levels unfounded accusation against a state party to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons? Third, the invocation of the right of self-defense under Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations is legally valid only where an armed attack has occurred. In the absence of such an attack, any resort to force constitutes an act of aggression. Neither the United States nor the Zionist regime of Israel had been subjected to armed attack by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Distinguished delegates, while the majority of nations condemn the aggression perpetrated by the Zionist regime and the United States against my country, it is deeply regrettable that 3 European states, the Security Council, the Board of Governors of the IAEA, and its Director General adopted a partisan stance and failed to fulfill their respective responsibilities. One must take heed of the fact that Iran was subjected to aggression by 2 nuclear-armed regimes, yet the United States and its allies obstructed the issuance of any resolution in both the Security Council and the IAEA Board of Governors. The Chancellor of Germany described the Israeli regime's aggression as, quote, the dirty job on their behalf. The French Minister of Defense openly admitted to military participation in support of the regime. The British Prime Minister, in politically motivated remarks, sought to legitimize the attacks by portraying Iran's peaceful nuclear program as a threat. The IAEA Director General, rather than condemning these assaults, still remains preoccupied with seeking inspections of the targeted facilities, ostensibly to assess the extent of the damage inflicted upon Iran's nuclear installation through the attacks. Such silence, such complicity in aggression, and deliberate inaction have all gravely imperiled the rule of law at the international level. Is this the multilateralism and maintenance of international peace and security that this Council claims to uphold? Is this the justice that the Charter promised to humanity? If the Security Council is incapacitated in the performance of its duties, then what institution remains to safeguard international peace and security? An attack on safeguarded nuclear facilities constitutes a grave crime. What message does the failure of the Board of Governors and the Security Council to issue a resolution of condemnation and the refusal of the Director General of the IAEA and certain permanent members of the Security Council to denounce the attacks sent to the member states of the agency? Why have these states and institutions remained silent in the face of the Zionist regime's refusal to adhere to the Non-Proliferation Treaty and its continued development of nuclear weapons program? Does this silence not convey to countries such as Iran the troubling message that should they remain outside the Non-Proliferation Treaty, they wouldn't only bear no obligations, but would in fact be rewarded and enjoy complete impunity? Under international law, the commission of an internationally wrongful act entails international responsibility, and the responsible party is under an obligation to make full operation and to offer assurances and guarantees of non-repetition. Alongside the legitimate and resolute defense of its people and territory, the Islamic Republic of Iran will pursue all of its rights to the realization of justice through diplomatic, legal, and judicial avenues available under international law, including recourse to international courts and tribunals. States are prohibited from recognizing situations resulting from violations of peremptory norms of international law. Failure to observe this prohibition gives rise to their international responsibility. The acts of aggression by the Israeli regime and the United States against Iran constitute a violation of the jus cogens norm prohibiting aggression. Third states are under an obligation not to recognize such act as lawful, nor to extend any assistance or support for the maintenance of such an unlawful situation. Mr. President, a nuclear-armed state party to the NPT, together with a nuclear-armed regime outside the framework of the NPT, has launched a military attack against the nuclear facilities of a state party to the NPT, facilities that were fully subject to the safeguard regimes of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, 3 European states, 2 of which are permanent members of the UN Security Council and have themselves violated the provisions of the very Council's Resolution 2231, have openly declared their intention to reinstate Security Council sanctions that were initially imposed 2 decades ago in connection with the very same facilities that are claimed to have been destroyed and which were subsequently terminated pursuant to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. Such an extraordinary level of double standards and disregard for the principles and purposes of the United Nations Security Council on the part of its own members is truly inconceivable. The 3 European states lack legal standing, and during the recent acts of aggression, any attempt to trigger the snapback mechanism in relation to an agreement that has not been implemented for 7 years constitutes a clear abuse of process and is legally invalid. Such an attempt must be unequivocally rejected. Mr. President, we firmly believe that peace is not achieved through bombs and coercion, but through respect for rights, justice, and diplomacy. The normalization of aggression must be unequivocally rejected. The Security Council must not be reduced to a tool at the service of the interests of particular powers. Rather, it must serve as the guardian of justice, peace, and security for all nations, irrespective of their size, power, or political orientation. Regrettably, it must be stated with the utmost clarity that the Security Council has either been unable or unwilling to respond appropriately and resolutely to blatant acts of aggression against the national sovereignty of certain states, military occupations, genocide, unlawful economic blockades, and the sponsorship of state terrorism. The list of these failures is long and deeply troubling. History shall be the judge of whether the Security Council has faithfully discharged its solemn responsibilities toward the world's nations. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, Iran is a peace-loving nation, but let there be no miscalculation. We stand united and resolute in the face of aggression and will exact and will exert a heavy toll upon the aggressor. The recent acts of aggression occurred while we were engaged in nuclear negotiations with the United States, an undeniable indication that the U.S. was not negotiating in good faith and that the nuclear issues serves merely as a pretext. The enemies of Iran have set their sights on the independence and national unity of our country. Yet our powerful armed forces and united people have utterly dashed their hopes. Iran stands proud and steadfast. We did not seek war, but we shall defend our people and homeland with the ferocity of a lion. The aggressors must know that their conspiracies shall fail, and it is Iran that shall endure. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Excellency, Mr. Kazim Gharib Awadi, Deputy Foreign Minister for Legal and International Affairs of Islamic Republic of Iran. I'll now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Peter Lonsky Tafenthal, Special Envoy for Global Affairs of the Chancellor of Austria. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we consider it a distinct privilege to address the Security Council and its members. We thank Pakistan for convening this timely debate at a time of multiplying crises and heightened geopolitical tensions. The Security Council has both a clear mandate and a moral responsibility to safeguard international peace and security by making full use of the tools provided by the UN Charter. First and foremost, the peaceful settlement of disputes. For Austria, a small and militarily neutral country, it is the cornerstone of our foreign policy. We rely on an international system where disputes are settled through dialogue, not domination, where law prevails over force, and where cooperation triumphs over confrontation. Austria has long championed the primacy of diplomacy and dialogue. As a staunch advocate of effective and inclusive multilateralism, we firmly believe that negotiated solutions are the only sustainable path to peace. This conviction is reflected in our enduring support for mediation, conflict prevention, and the Secretary General's good offices. The instruments enshrined in Chapter 6 of the Charter, including negotiation, mediation, conciliation, and judicial settlement, are as vital today as they were back in 1945. But to be effective, they require political will, persistence, and above all, a genuine commitment to peace. Austria therefore welcomes the renewed focus on prevention and peaceful dispute settlement in the Pact for the Future, and calls for those principles to be fully integrated into the daily work of the Security Council and the broader UN system. In this context, Austria supports the strengthening of the UN's mediation architecture, including through increased resources for the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and its mediation support unit. Austria equally advocates for early, inclusive and coordinated preventive action in close cooperation with regional and sub-regional organizations. We also emphasize universal respect for international law and the UN Charter as the foundation for a peaceful relation, regardless of the size. Austria also calls on the Council to invest in sustainable peace. This includes supporting inclusive national dialogue processes, ensuring women's full and equal participation in peace efforts, and working more closely with the Peacebuilding Commission, particularly in transitions and in post-conflict situations. More regular horizon scanning briefings could help anticipate risks before they become emergencies. Mr. President, during the Summit of the Future, our leaders have recommitted themselves to the UN Charter and to the multilateral cooperation. The Pact for the Future reminds us that peace does not begin in a council chamber. It begins with the will to resolve disputes through dialogue and compromise, and with the courage to uphold common rules even when they are inconvenient. The Security Council must be able to act in unity, in line with its mandate and in service of all the peoples. To this end, Austria also supports long overdue reform of the Council, including the correction of historical imbalances such as the underrepresentation of Africa. Mr. President, colleagues, peace requires leadership, it requires investment, and it requires trust. Austria remains fully committed as host country to the United Nations in Vienna, as a consistent supporter of mediation and prevention, and as a candidate for a non-permanent seat on the Security Council for the period 2027-2028. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Excellency, Special Envoy for Global Affairs of the Chancellor of Austria. I would now give the floor to Excellency, the representative of Liechtenstein. You have the floor, Excellency.
Mr. President, thank you for convening today's debate. Liechtenstein fully supports efforts in the Council to make better use of its powers and functions under Chapter 6. We see the increased need for the Pacific settlement of disputes across the globe, given that armed conflicts are taking an increasingly long time to resolve, with an increasing toll on civilians. The importance of Chapter 6 also arises from a similar dynamic playing out in the Council, which has for a few years now been increasingly unable to use its Chapter 7 functions to end ongoing conflicts. We note that in this respect, under Article 25 of the Charter, all decisions of the Council are binding in the same manner. President, the membership has taken important steps in recent years to highlight the role of mechanisms under Chapter 6, notably in Action 16 of the Pact for the Future, which urges the Secretary-General to ensure that the United Nations is adequately equipped to lead and support mediation and preventive diplomacy. Even at this time of financial stress for the organization, Liechtenstein reiterates that mediation and preventive diplomacy is an investment that pays many times over, not only in the cost of warfare averted, but in the fundamental value of human life and dignity. Liechtenstein continues to extend our support in this regard to DPPA's Mediation Support Unit and the standby team of senior mediation advisors. President, Liechtenstein wishes to highlight two further topics that we believe can enhance the implementation of Chapter 6 of the Charter. Firstly, we note that members of this Council have a specific and additional obligation when considering decisions taken under Chapter 6 of the Charter to abstain from voting when they are a party to a dispute. This binding obligation, contained in Article 27, Part 3 of the Charter, and reaffirmed by leaders in last year's Pact for the Future, is clearly germane to the aim of Chapter 6, to seek a resolution at the earliest possible stage of disputes between member states of this organization. The perception that a state might act as judge in its own case in a vote of this Council could indeed harm prospects for dispute settlement. As part of the implementation of the Pact, we hope that member states will consider formulating criteria that can enable the full and consistent implementation of this obligation. Mr. President, efforts taken under Chapter 6 must also take into account the full range of conflict drivers. Liechtenstein has long noted that many conflicts begin in the responses of states to communities, including minority groups, seeking a greater degree of internal self-determination, which can include autonomy, self-governance, or self-administration. These so-called self-determination conflicts constitute around half of the armed conflicts occurring since the 1960s. While self-determination claims are not the only driver of conflicts in these situations, it is a dimension that we believe is understudied by mediators and under-acknowledged by states. This is why, for many years, Liechtenstein has had its own initiative on preventing able to speak further with all members on the substance of our initiative. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency and representative of Liechtenstein. I would now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Dara O'Brien, Minister for Climate, Energy and Environment, and Minister for Transport of Ireland. Excellency, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Ireland thanks Pakistan for convening this important debate and aligns itself with the statement delivered by the European Union. At the heart of the UN Charter lies a commitment by Member States to settle their disputes by peaceful means. This is not merely an aspirational principle. It is a binding legal obligation under Article 2.3 of the Charter and forms a cornerstone of the rules-based international order. The duty to seek peaceful settlement of disputes is a central feature of the international rule of law. It must be upheld because rules developed through the negotiation and agreement are accepted as legitimate and they're based on consent. Ireland calls on the UN Security Council to shoulder its obligations in the maintenance of international peace and security and to play a central role in advancing the tools of diplomacy and preventative action. When used effectively, its Chapter 6 toolkit can de-escalate tensions before they spiral into violence. Ireland's engagement in and support of a rules-based international order premised on the peaceful settlement of disputes is illustrated by our active support for the institutions that safeguard it. We are therefore a strong supporter of the International Court of Justice. That court is strengthened when states accept its compulsory jurisdiction, as Ireland has done. Ireland is also firmly committed to the International Criminal Court and its role in seeking to ensure that those responsible for the most serious crimes of international concern cannot do so with impunity. Its independence must be respected and must be safeguarded. Mr. President, the peaceful settlement of disputes requires not only legal mechanisms, but also political courage and inclusive processes. Our own history in Ireland has taught us that peace processes are possible with patient dialogue, with principled engagement, and with inclusive negotiation. It requires addressing the root causes and drivers of conflict. It means sustained political will and the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women and the meaningful participation of youth and civil society. While the Security Council has the primary role under the Charter to maintain international peace and security, other parts of the UN must also be engaged to facilitate the peaceful settlement of disputes. Ireland is proud to contribute to global peace-building efforts, including through our support to the UN Peacebuilding Fund and partnerships with civil society on conflict resolution and reconciliation. We also welcome the growing collaboration between the UN, regional organisations and local actors. Ireland further calls on the Secretary-General to strengthen preventative diplomacy and use all the tools at his disposal as set out in the new Agenda for Peace. Mr. President, in closing, Ireland remains firmly committed to multilateralism, the rule of law, and the peaceful resolution of disputes, principles that are more relevant now than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. for your speech and for your statement. I will now give the floor to Excellency the representative of Indonesia.
Mr. President, thank you for convening this open debate, and I also thank the Secretary General for his valuable briefing. Mr. President, today's topic is truly pertinent. Over the past few years, we have witnessed a troubling rise in protracted conflicts around the world amidst rising unilateral actions and geopolitical divides. In nearly every major crisis in the last few years, multilateralism has been pushed aside. The UN and the Security Council often take the back seat, perhaps not due to unwillingness, but certainly due to the outdated multilateral system. The UN, once at the forefront of peaceful settlement of disputes, now seem to have given a franchise to the powerful few. Indeed, too often, conflict resolutions relied on the intervention of the powerful, while the power of the Council seems to wither. And while the strong are sometimes capable to settle disputes, the absence of multilateralism often makes the solution of rules, justice, and humanity in manners that render the Charter meaningless, an imposition rather than an enduring solution to disputes. And the problem is, we need the world to endure, and this requires present and future generations everywhere feel assured that they are not merely objects to any political talks about their fate. This requires the revival of multilateralism, a UN that is not only surviving, but adapting and reclaiming its authority as the cornerstone of global peace, a UN that can avoid the League of Nations moment. On this backdrop, allow me to share 3 points. First, UN reform has indeed become a necessity. We must use the UN's 80th anniversary as a momentum to restore the UN relevance. This requires restoring trust in multilateralism and updating it to keep pace with the 21st century. The Pact for the Future has given us the roadmap for the way forward. We must restore global confidence in the Council's ability to act as an effective force for peace that reflects global conscience. This requires a Council that can promote trust, solidarity, and shared responsibility, amplify the voice of smaller nations through genuine dialogue, so that the Council can reclaim its role as the primary platform for collective force for peace, reducing possible entry points for unilateral interventions, and ensuring disputes are addressed through dialogue and diplomacy, not dominance. Second, enhancing UN strategic foresight for preventive diplomacy, early warning, and dispute resolution. Better use of digital technology and artificial intelligence to enable better data-driven policy analysis will accelerate UN early response to track conflict trends and early warning, providing guidance for timely peacemaking processes, including good offices and mediation. Moreover, the New York processes must better connect with those on the ground, including UN field missions, field offices, and regional organizations. And third, ensuring adequate support for UN peace processes. Today's conflicts are increasingly difficult to resolve. We must thus ensure adequate, predictable, and sustained financing for peace building, peacekeeping, and UN dispute resolution. We also need to invest in local and regional peace actors to amplify local ownership, so that the peace process reflects the needs of those most affected, not just the agenda of the powerful. And as our institution faces significant pressure, we must use all avenues, including the UN 80 initiative, to actually make better investment in peace. Mr. President, the future of multilateralism and its capacity to peaceful settlement of disputes relies on our capability to prioritize peace over might and force. Indonesia stands ready to collaborate with all to safeguard multilateralism. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of Indonesia. I now give the floor to Excellency, the representative of Kazakhstan. Floor is yours, Excellency.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, let me begin by expressing our appreciation to Pakistan for convening this important open debate on an issue of fundamental importance for the maintenance of international peace and security. Kazakhstan firmly believes in the principles underpinning today's discussion, and we welcome the opportunity to contribute to this debate. The President of Kazakhstan has consistently reaffirmed my country's commitment to the principles and purposes of the United Nations Charter. In this year, marking the 80th anniversary of the organization, we once again emphasize that upholding the fundamental principles, including the renunciation of the threat or use of force, respect for territorial integrity, the peaceful settlement of disputes, and the genuine commitment to multilateralism and international law remains essential for safeguarding global stability. Kazakhstan firmly supports all efforts to promote the peaceful settlement of disputes in accordance with Article 33 of the UN Charter, including negotiations, mediation, conciliation, and engagement with regional organizations. We highlight the enduring relevance of the 1982 Manila Declaration on the Peaceful Settlement of International Disputes and the 1970 Declaration on Principles of International Law. Kazakhstan consistently advocates for strengthening the central role of the United Nations in maintaining international peace and security. In this regard, we underscore the importance of further enhancing the role of the Secretary General as a key mediator and moral authority in conflict prevention and resolution. The importance of preventive diplomacy, multilateralism, and regional cooperation in maintaining peace cannot be overstated. As a founding member and initiator of all major regional cooperation frameworks in its neighborhood, Kazakhstan strongly believes in the value of regionalism as a cornerstone of preventive diplomacy and peaceful dispute resolution, like UNRCCA, an organization which we have in Central Asia. The Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia, SICA, initiated by Kazakhstan, stands as a modern and inclusive platform for fostering mutual trust and promoting dialogue among Asian nations. Likewise, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, of which Kazakhstan is a founding member, has evolved into a key mechanism for strengthening regional stability through confidence building along borders and challenges through peaceful means. Sustainable development is an integral part of global efforts to promote peace and security. In this context, Kazakhstan attaches particular importance to the establishment of the UN Regional Center on SDGs for Central Asia and Afghanistan in Almaty, which is expected to contribute to advancing stability and steady progress towards a sustainable and peaceful future in our region. Finally, Kazakhstan supports the continuation of regular debates on this topic at the UN platform for sharing experiences and disseminating best practices in the peaceful dispute resolution in order to strengthen collective efforts in conflict prevention and building trust among nations. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of Kazakhstan. I now give the floor to Excellency, the representative of the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a founding member of the United Nations, the Philippines reaffirms its commitment to the Charter of the United Nations and firm adherence to the rule of law among nations as essential to multilateralism and the peaceful settlement of disputes. Upholding the Charter means adherence to its fundamental principles, as well as active engagement with the UN processes, including through the Special Committee of the Charter of the United Nations. The Special Committee has contributed significantly to enhancing common understanding of the Charter. The Philippines highlights the 1982 Manila Declaration on the Peaceful Settlement of International Disputes as a milestone outcome for the Special Committee. The Manila Declaration emerged amidst the geopolitical tensions of the Cold War as an initiative of non-aligned countries. The Declaration reaffirms fundamental principles of the Charter, among others, the obligation of all states under Article 33 to settle their disputes by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered. Over 4 decades later, it remains as relevant as ever. as we confront complex interrelated challenges to the multilateral order, including in the context of the new agenda for peace. The Manila Declaration recognizes the primary role of the Security Council and member states' role to strengthen it so that it may fully and effectively discharge its responsibilities in the area of the settlement of disputes or of any situation which is likely to endanger international peace and security. The Declaration reaffirms that member states must, inter alia, encourage the Security Council to make wider use of the opportunities under the Charter to review disputes or situations the continuance of which is likely to endanger the maintenance of international peace and security. Consider making greater use of the fact-finding capacity of the Security Council. Encourage the Security Council to make wider use of the subsidiary organs, and encourage the Security Council to act without delay, particularly in cases where international disputes developed into armed conflicts, among others. In line with the spirit of the Manila Declaration, with the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, we gave an example of how states should resolve their differences through reason and through right. Resorting to peaceful settlement of disputes through arbitration and credible and competent international tribunals plays a key role in the interpretation of international norms and should not be seen as an unfriendly act among civilized nations. Mr. President, as a trusted partner, pathfinder, and peacemaker in the pursuit of peace, the Philippines is ready to work with all nations towards enhancing the observance of the principle of peaceful settlement of disputes in relation between states and contribute to the elimination of the danger of recourse to force or to the threat of force, to the promotion of a policy of cooperation and peace and of respect for the independence and sovereignty of all states, to enhancing the role of the United Nations in preventing conflicts and settling them peacefully, and consequently to the strengthening of international peace and security. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Excellency, the representative of Philippines. Excellencies, there are still a number of speakers remaining on my list for with this meeting. I intend, with the concurrence of the members of the Council, to suspend the meeting until 3 p.m. today. Thank you.